We'll go ahead and get started. Let's see. Notice of the time and place of these committee meetings was publicized by notifying the area news media, by updating the OPPD website, and by emailing such notice to each of the district's directors on December 9th, 2022. Thank you all for joining us remotely via WebEx events. As a reminder to board members, executive leadership team, and OPPD staff, please mute your microphones to reduce background noise. To members of the public, thank you for attending. You are in listen-only mode. If you have any technology questions, please use the chat feature in WebEx to communicate with the event host. Our agenda for today's meeting is as follows. We will conduct a closed session this morning to discuss one topic, the quarterly enterprise risk management update. We will conclude the discussion no later than 9:50 a.m. in order to open the WebEx meeting to allow the public and OPPD staff to join. We will begin public session at approximately 10 a.m. and receive reports from each committee. Director Moody, do we have a motion to go into closed session?
We sure do, Director Bogner. I move that the board go into closed session at this time, 9:01 a.m. to discuss one topic, the quarterly enterprise risk management update. A closed session is necessary for the protection of the public interest because the discussion involves matters that are confidential and protected by the attorney-client privilege and attorney work product doctrine and involve the discussion of security for district property and utility infrastructure information. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, Corporate Secretary, may we have the roll call?
Yes, Christie's voice is not cooperating, so I'll do that today. Director Bogner,
Yes.
Director Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Director Howard,
Yes.
Director Molhoff,
Yes. Yes.
Director Moody,
Yes.
Director Spurgeon,
Yes.
Director Williams,
Yes.
and Director Yoder.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, the motion to go into closed session has passed. This closed session will be limited to discussion regarding the quarterly enterprise risk management update. No votes or other actions will be taken. So at this time, public attendees will be removed from the WebEx event, and we will stop the event recording and eventually lock the WebEx event.
It does look like the webinar is locked. We do need to stop the recording.
Papers. I need a motion in a second to reconvene an open session.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Brian, can you call roll, please?
Bogner,
Yes.
Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Howard,
Here.
Molhoff,
Yes.
Moody,
Yes.
Spurgeon,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Yoder.
All right, the motion to come out of closed session at 10 a.m. is carried. This closed session was limited to discussion regarding one topic, the quarterly enterprise risk management update. No votes or other board action were taken during the closed session. Earlier before the closed session, I made the announcement regarding public notice of this meeting. As a reminder to board members, executive leadership team, and OPPD staff, please mute your microphones to reduce background noise. To members of the public, thank you for attending. You are in listen-only mode. If you have any technology questions, please use the chat feature in WebEx to communicate with the event host. Per the board's guidelines for public participation, we do not take public comment during the all committees meeting. We will take public comments at the board meeting on Thursday, December 15th, which will be conducted in person at the Omaha Douglas Civic Center and begins at 5 p.m. The public may attend in person or remotely via WebEx events by going to OPPD.com. Joining me today via WebEx are my fellow board members, Mike Kavanaugh, Sarah Howard, Janice Molhoff, Craig Moody, Mary Spurgeon, Eric Williams, and Rick Yoder. We also have President and CEO Javier Fernandez, our General Counsel Steve Bruckner with the Fraser Stryker Law Firm, members of our executive leadership team, and OPPD staff. Additionally, we currently have, I don't know how many participants. It looks like
15.
15 attendees and 28 panelists that include OPPD employees and members of the public. We conducted a closed session earlier to discuss one topic, quarterly enterprise risk management update. Today we will hear the following committee reports. Director Moody will provide the governance report. Director Yoder will provide the finance report. Director Williams will provide the systems management and nuclear oversight report, and Director Molhoff will provide the public information report. Javier Fernandez will now give the safety briefing.
Great, thank you, Chair Bogner. Can we move to the next slide, please? Very important here for those of us who are in an OPPD facility. We're in different places at different buildings, but make sure that you know where the first aid kits are, the location of AEDs and exits. Very, very important to have all of those in mind ahead of time before you need them. If you're not feeling well, please stay home. It's that time of year when we're now starting to get ill and spreading germs. So we ask all of our employees and stakeholders, if you're not feeling ill, stay home. We provide this fantastic way to engage via WebEx. If you're not feeling well during the WebEx call and you may need attention, you may need medical attention or some other assistance, and you're alone in your place wherever you're taking this WebEx, I highly recommend that you make sure that someone on this call has some information for how to assist you, either a phone number of a loved one or your address, so that we can send help if you were to need help. Unfortunately, these are lessons that we've learned in this virtual world, and it's important for us to identify that help. In the case of an active shooter, if you're in an OPPD facility, that will be code 32, where our protocol is to run, hide, or fight. Our advice, as always, is make sure that you identify the routes where you would run. How would you escape the room? Where would you hide? And ultimately, what would you use to fight? Don't wait until the time is here, because that would be too late to react. On the right side of the screen, it's a psychological safety reminder. I will focus this time on respect, which is at the top of that circle, making sure that every conversation we have is done in a respectful manner. Many times we are discussing things of which we may feel very strongly about, we may feel energized, we may have passion around topics. That is not to distract us from having a respectful conversation. Always respect the other person's point of view and conduct conversations in a respectful manner. This is one of the elements that leads to a psychologically safe environment. The next slide, please. Our focus for December, as weather has now started to change, and so stay focused behind the wheel. Vehicle accidents are starting to trend up, as it's usually the case in the December-January time frames. We are starting to see freezing rain, freezing fog, and here in a couple of days we will see snow. So driving hazards will continue to be top of mind. Don't forget your 360-degree walk around prior to getting into your vehicle. This is incredibly important. We ask our OPPD employees to do that on OPPD vehicles. Walk around, look underneath the car, make sure that you're safe and free to go. Because if you don't, you may have either a pet, you could have a child who may be hiding away and could result in a tragedy. So we always recommend that 360 walk around. It takes 5 additional seconds, but it would be 5 very important seconds of your day. The last one is dealing with the familiar foes. November, we saw a handful of injuries from our 2 most common injury types, which is cuts and lacerations. One that I explained at the last board meeting, and then sprains, strains and tears. They continue to be, that soft tissue damage. As we're potentially going into shoveling snow and doing a different type of work in cold conditions, it's important for us to remind our employees and our stakeholders to warm up before you start doing any physical work. Very, very important to prevent that. And that completes my safety briefing.
All right, thank you. We will start this morning with the governance chair report. Director Moody.
Thank you, Director Bogner. Good morning, everyone. The governance committee met on the afternoon of December 8th. You see the agenda before you. We will talk about item number 2 here in a moment. I want to give you a couple updates on items 3, 4, and 5. With respect to number 3, as you all know, we're working our way towards the end of the year and a new year, which means some revisitation and turnover of board officer positions and committees. You've all been involved in conversations together, and Director Bogner is leading the charge in putting together a preliminary slate for approval in January. As a reminder, in January, our intent is to approve both board officer positions, chair, vice chair, treasurer, secretary, and then subsequently to transition to approval of committee assignments as well. So the intention is to do both in the January board meeting. So we're on track. Again, many of you have had conversations already. If you haven't talked to Director Bogner recently, I'm confident she will be in touch soon. And we'll make sure that we get those pinned down for the January board meeting. Actually, we'll see those in governance, and then we'll work our way towards those. GP10 came up because we are Director Yoder. This is his last, at least all committee meeting, and he will be replaced by Matt Core. He will join us in January, and so we had a quick discussion about the district's plans for orientation for Mr. Core. And we're not going to walk through the details of that today, and the governance committee didn't necessarily need to get into the details either. What we did discuss, though, is that orientation will begin with a half day in early January to really get him going. And for you all, what's most important to have your eyes on is that you will be notified of when those training opportunities exist and what the subject matter is, and be given an opportunity to attend. I don't know about you, but refreshers are always helpful. Continuous learning is important. And so to the extent that you find yourself interested in attending any of those training sessions for Mr. Core, please by all means raise your hand and hop in there. I think for those of you that experienced this when other board members were in those orientation sessions, it made for a much richer conversation. So I would encourage you all to if you can carve out the time, find some time to go attend those training sessions as well. It's going to be kind of a mix for him, certainly of the basics of the electric industry. As you all know, it's a very technical industry, so I want to make sure that his understanding of the industry is raised as well. But it will also be about our policy and governance structure. Of course, that's something that really is critical for him to have a good understanding for, so that he understands how to navigate the system. Okay, so that's board training and orientation, and then finally board work plan. The most important thing that came out of this discussion that you all need to be aware of is our plans for reconvening these all committee meetings in person. That is still on the horizon. It is the hope and dream and desire of the governance committee to be sure to reconvene in person. Kate and her team are working towards a solution to make that a possibility come February, but it may not necessarily occur. The technology and systems that we need in order to do that in the place that we've identified are coming together slowly at this point. I'll call it supply chain issues primarily, unfortunately. So they're exploring other options for February and March with an eye towards getting back onto our regular routine in April. The governance committee asked that we strike the right balance between finding a solution that's temporary for the February-March timeframe while not really kind of going to the ends of the earth We've been doing this for a while now, and we can do it another couple months if we can. But if there's a solution that's going to work for us in February, March, again, that is temporary in anticipation of a more permanent solution in April, that's what we're gonna target. So more to come on that. I just want to express my appreciation for the work that team is doing to try and make sure that we've got an opportunity to get together in person again. I know that many of us are looking forward. I would say probably all of us are looking forward to that. Okay, that is the end of my committee chair report. I'll just leave some space here for a moment to see if anybody has any questions or if anybody else on the governance committee would like to chime in as well. Okay, hearing none, let's carry on. Okay, this is over to you, Mr. Fernandez.
Yeah, thank you, Director Moody. So this is the traditional annual exercise we go through just to make sure that we're planning for all of our meetings. So this is board policy GP4, where we are developing a cadence of meetings. So what we have proposed here is a list of dates for our committee meetings, board meetings, and pre-committee meetings for the 2023 calendar year. So if you can go to the next slide, and you have here. So what we try to do here, and of course these are all drafts, but we put together a plan for board members to not only know the dates where we have planned committee meetings, but also more or less the topics that will come to the board. Of course, these will change, and they change all the time as work comes to us, but I think it's important for us to distribute work and reports evenly throughout the year for board members to be aware of when are we going to, for example, monitoring reports. When are we going to review monitoring reports? When are they coming up for approvals, etc. So that this information has been shared with all directors. You will have them on your calendars. We have tentatively placed a July board committee meeting and a board meeting date. The past 2 years, the board has made a decision once the year begins on whether or not we will have a July board meeting or not. The past 2 years we have canceled them, and which is a nice break during the summer where we can then split some of the topics that we discuss in July. Some of them we have them earlier in June or later in August. But for now, we're making sure that we're populating the calendar every month from January to December of 2023 and saving the dates for those. And I think that's it. I don't know if there's another slide, Ms. Labs. So we have, that's it. Any questions that I may be able to answer, either myself or Scott Foch?
Dr. Bogner, go ahead.
I might be misremembering something, but I thought that maybe earlier this year we talked about consolidating when we review some of the monitoring reports, so we're doing them more in groups. Am I making that up, or was that something we talked about?
No, you're not. I think your memory serves you well. What we're trying to do here is be efficient, very efficient with our time. And so we have scheduled there are a few meetings where we have maybe 2 or 3 monitoring reports presented at the time. In fact, we began that practice this year. I believe last month was a good example where we had 3 monitoring reports. That will be the case for next year. However, there might be 1 or 2 monitoring reports that have to happen earlier on their own for a number of reasons. But yeah, we're trying to make a more efficient use of our time. Another one is if executive personnel performance reviews, right? We're consolidating them all, and the plan here is to have them all. I believe it's in the June timeframe where we will have them all. Instead of having one every month on their anniversary date, we're trying to make use of the time more efficiently.
Correct. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that question, Director Wagner. Other colleagues, any questions? Okay, at the risk of stating the obvious, this is a plan, plans change. So we will use it as a guide for how we plan our time next year, but things are going to arise that may send us astray a bit. And so we'll allow it to evolve as the business needs. Okay, and then now speaking of monitor reports, we're up to SD8, Employee Relations Monitor Report. We're going to turn it over to Ms. Mikkel Purnell. You're muted, Mikkel.
Yes. Hello.
There you go.
Excellent. Good morning, board members, colleagues, and members of the public who may be with us. Yes, this is that time of the year when we present the monitoring report for SD8 Employee Relations. And as you might determine just based on what you've been hearing over the last few years, employee relations is now a little bit more important than we may have. It's always been important to some of us, but the importance of it may be even more heightened just because of some things that have happened both during the pandemic as well as post-pandemic. So you've been hearing about the Great Resignation. I think we spoke to that last year during this time. We've also heard of, and you may be familiar a little bit with the phrase quiet quitting now, what that means. And above everything else, there is also out there in these circles for recruiting and acquiring great talent, what we are calling the war on talent. So all of these things is actually making employee relations even more important. Next page, please. So here is a list of the provisions of SD8. The first two really speak to our developing and maintaining a diverse and inclusive workforce. And then secondly, we want to establish a goal, or we have a goal, to achieve top quartile performance in employee engagement for similar sized companies. Now I'll speak to those two more immediately. As it relates to the first one, we are definitely progressing nicely in this space. For the second item, we did not achieve top quartile performance in this space. And really and truly, the rest of the report, or what we will share with you, is going to expound on what we have done in this area, both to achieve and to continue to develop a diverse and inclusive workplace. But we'll also spend a little bit of time sharing with you what happened or what the results are from the employee engagement survey. The third provision that's shown here really lists some of the things that OPPD will do and what we have done really to support those items that are the first two, and some other things that's going to make employee relations come alive within our company. Next page, please. So here we're going to start with Legacy I3, and this may be, for all intents and purposes, the last time we will be talking about it, maybe in this setting, in this way. So the Legacy program is one that we started in 2017, and it really was our efforts not only to honor our community, but also for us to do some of the work required to, in fact, get or promote that diverse workforce that we were talking about. So we took high school juniors and seniors through a program that was developed by someone who was in the engineering space. And we were able to bring them into OPPD, expose them to our business and the way we do things. And really what this shows is the statistics as it relates to that program. So we've had almost 90 students who've graduated We see here how many are enrolled in college, who went on to get an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, etc. We have, over the years, now we have employer partners, and that's shown in the third column. So in addition to OPPD, we have other employers in the community who are also helping with this program. So again, this was our efforts, not only to honor our community in a very meaningful way, but also to promote a diverse workforce. Next page, please. So this is the beginning of what you're going to see here is the beginning of what we have done, our commitment to personal and professional development for our employees. We have at OPPD a number of employee resource groups as well as communities of practice. Communities of practice are becoming more commonplace now, not only just here in OPPD, but within the diversity and inclusion space. And examples of the communities of practice include, as you will see on the right side of this page, there's the Toastmasters program, Data Analytics and Technologies Alliance, etc. So what these groups do, not only do they promote inclusion, but these groups also are very instrumental, or quite instrumental rather, within OPPD in providing this personal and professional development that we've been talking about. So the OPPD Women's Network, for example, as well as AAN, the African American Network, the Latino Society of OPPD, these organizations really get their members together. Not only do they provide professional development for their members, but they open those trainings in many cases so that professional development is actually afforded to any employee within the organization. Then on the side of the communities of practice, those organizations or groups rather of employees really are the ones who tend to either specialize in a particular skill. Here at OPPD, an example of which would be the Society of Engineers. But we also have the Empowering Working Families group, and that group has been offering support and training for parents, new parents, experienced parents, etc. But it is a family-focused group that comes together and really, again, lifts each other up, thereby living out our core value of caring for each other. Next page, please. Continuing on the front of offering development for our employees, here is a list. By no means is it exhaustive, but this definitely highlights again some of the things that we have been doing. As it relates, I mentioned some of the parenting sessions that's shown at the bottom of the list. But in addition to that, we have been heavily involved with the suicide prevention and those types of programs, to the extent that most of the employees within the human capital and the safety business units continue to be recertified in mental health first aid. We rather expect to continue this practice, even I would say in being more intentional of expanding this offering to other groups, maybe starting with leaders who may have an opportunity to see if we have employees who may be in danger or something of that nature. But ultimately, this is something we would like to offer to a broader swath of employees, so that we again can be cognizant and pay attention and continue to care for each other. Next slide, please. As it relates to this development that we're talking about, we were very fortunate in that last year we brought on board or started, we have now a learning management system. So when I say this, it will sound like hyperbole, but it is not. We literally have thousands of courses or programs available through an online platform that our employees can engage in. So while leaders are to help or encourage or promote professional development, and our leaders are actually expected to, in some instances, help employees to develop their individual development plans. This platform allows employees pretty much to be trained on demand. So what does that mean? I often reference the fact that Netflix and other platforms like that allow us to watch a movie when we want to. We now can shop when we want to through the Amazon platform and others. And so here at OPPD, we have a learning management system that will afford our employees the opportunity to be trained, be developed, to learn at their own discretion whenever they want to. And so for us, that is significant. Again, there are many programs here of which I think you are familiar, but wanted to highlight the fact that we now have this learning management system. We have this tool available to us. Blue Ocean Brain, which is shown on the upper part of the list, is also available on that platform, as is the case with some others. And we are able to leverage that tool in a very meaningful way. So I think that is a great addition to everything that we've been doing and that we have going on. Next page, please. So what we see here, the enhancement of the leadership framework with learning options and things of that nature, as well as the D&I engagement. Our diversity and inclusion team has been going throughout the district, visiting business units and different departments, really to share what is happening in this space, to explain the importance of inclusion to our organization and what that might look like. I will say, this being perhaps the first year that we've done this in a broad way, I think that has been very successful. Again, lots of work to be done in that space, but we are definitely on the right track. I'm very proud of that work. As it relates to the leadership framework, it's going to be very important for us to continue to refine what inclusion is, what it means to OPPD, and what it looks like. So when we're talking about these leadership framework and the learning options and things of that nature, it really is speaking to what behaviors specifically, what behaviors will indicate to us that we truly have an inclusive environment, an inclusive culture that SDA actually asked us to do, asked us to develop. So I think that is going to be very important as we go along to develop, or we go on to develop that a little bit more in a robust way. Next page, please. Before I go on to speak to where we are relative to maintaining and communicating written policies, are there any questions thus far? I think we're going to go relatively quickly after this.
Director Spurgeon, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to, I guess, slide 4 in diligence here on the resource groups and practices. I'm just curious, what's OPPD Global Connections? What's that about? The others are kind of self-explanatory, but that's new.
Excellent. Global Connections is a group of employees, many of whom have, in fact, global connections, as the name suggests, whether it's that they are from other countries in the world, but really it's a group of employees who came together, who are interested actually in other countries, who are more interested in the global flavor of what's happening here at OPPD and elsewhere. So each month they have the opportunity perhaps to talk about not only world events, but global phenomena, or just even from a vacation perspective. Where did you go? Where did you visit? What happened? So again, that group really speaks to what is happening here at OPPD. Not only are we seeing or embracing diversity from a local or a national perspective, but we are definitely seeing more people coming to us who have connections outside the country.
And Director Spurgeon, great question. Another thing, as Michael mentioned, a few examples. There are two that come to mind. For example, there were a few drives for collections and donations for when the war in Ukraine broke off. It was this group that focused on that. There's another very important one, because this group encompasses other nationalities, other races, and for example, there have been a few activities and events that are focused on Asian American and Pacific Islander population in OPPD. We don't have a group that focuses only on that group part of the population, but rather that falls under the umbrella of global connections for the time being. So that's another example of how that group plays into the ERG ecosystem.
Thank you. That's great to know. Appreciate that.
You are welcome. And as we get back on track, I think heading down to page 8, I'll also mention, in addition to helping with the war with Ukraine efforts, they also helped collect light bulbs, and we were working with a local agency here as it relates to refugees that have been coming to the Omaha area. So Global Connections was also instrumental in doing that. So that was the other event that organization helped with. Thank you for that question. So we are now looking at written policies, and being a power company, we have been, for the most part, very good about always having written policies, and that continues to be the case. As you are aware, this year we actually negotiated our 3 contracts with the unions. So we have the collective bargaining agreements in place. Right now, we are revisiting and updating those for the recent negotiations, and we expect those to be on track within a few short weeks. So early in Q1, we will have the booklets that represent all of the collective bargaining agreements again. Corporate policies and procedures. There is a committee that actually not only initiates or creates new policies, but we visit our policies pretty frequently, and that's called the oversight. There is a policy oversight committee, and that committee really they go through, revisit policies, those that are outdated, either for dates, names, whatever that might look like. We try to keep those as generic as possible so that they can be fluid. Sometimes no corrections or updates are needed, but on occasion we need to make those updates, and then they go through the committee, then they come to the ELT for final review before being signed and put out there on our intranet site where all employees have access to it. So again, this is all in an effort for us to maintain and communicate these written policies. The employee handbook is also online, and that goes through a similar process. The code of conduct, that is there as well. Ethics point, you may be familiar with. We discussed that in a bit more detail when we looked at SD 10, which is our directive around ethics. And ethics point really is the tool that we use to capture any complaints, internal complaints, or anything that needs to be highlighted in that way for an investigation, things of that nature. So that is the tool that we use. And employees are well versed with that, or they're familiar with it. And when we get a complaint or something that needs to be investigated, that may be listed here as either an internal or an external complaint, those are entered into ethics point, just so we can keep records of those. So the external complaints, I'll also mention, that may be filed through some type of external process, also includes federal or state agencies like the EEOC, for example, or if there's a legal claim, all of that might be entered into ethics point. So just for your awareness, that is how we keep up with all of those things. Next page, please. This information, this list really points to, again, the work that we are doing relative to keeping up not only with our collective bargaining agreements, but we have pledged to bargain in good faith with the agents, with the officers that represent our employees who are under CBA. That's the collective bargaining agreement. So these are some things we do throughout the year that we have done, that we will continue to do to help us with that. So again, highlighted that negotiations were completed in 2022. We have had 5-year contracts historically. However, we have a 3-year contract now. So pretty much within a 2.5-year time frame, we'll be going back to the table to negotiate with these employees. We, in between in between the negotiations, if there is something else that we need to negotiate, we may administer or come to an agreement under a memoranda or letters of understanding. So that is there. The other things really just show again the importance of the relationship that we have with the unions and how we work tirelessly to make sure that we continue to develop those. So we have quarterly benefits meetings where we actually invite union leadership to hear from some of our vendors, whether it's relative or related to the pension plan or to our healthcare benefits, etc. So that is something that we've been doing for a while now. We will continue to do that. We also have safety meetings. So Kevin McCormick and his team, they meet quarterly with union leadership as well. And if and when something comes up that warrants a revision to a process or anything like that, it's usually during those meetings that would be brought to the forefront for discussion. So again, we are really in the mode of being proactive as it relates to this relationship and things that need to happen, opposed to being reactive. Something happens and then we're trying to catch up with it. We have found that those have been rather fruitful, and I too am pleased with the work that we are doing in those spaces. And of course, the last two items not only speak to our relationship with the unions, but again, furthers the promotion, so to speak, as it relates to employee development, the employee development, personal and professional. Next page, please. So we did conduct an annual engagement survey, and these are the results. We have highlighted, and I've mentioned already, that we did not achieve top quartile performance when compared to similar sized companies. And at this time, I'm going to invite Nina Swanson, who is our Director for Organization Development, to come and give you a bit more details on these results. Nina?
I believe Naina Swanson is on the attendee list, and we may need to promote her to panelist. There you go.
Thank you, Javier and Mikkel. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. I'll try to start my video as well. Good morning to the board and to the community. I am happy to share with you sort of the results of our annual engagement survey. What you have here is a slide that shows continued high response rates, which is a strength for our organization. We are still actually probably an industry standard best practice around the response rates. 86% of our employees in this year's survey participated. While we did see a decrease, if you look at the decrease this year, it brought us kind of back in line with 2019, 2020 response rates. I would tell you that OPPD, we benefited greatly from what I will call a pandemic bump in 2020 and 2021 with the measures that we took with our employees in general really impacted how they looked at our organization. They felt safe, they felt secure, they felt cared for during that window, and that showed up in our survey. And in fact, many companies in the survey during that window saw some bump. Our bump was significantly higher. So we have evened out a little bit this year. As you'll see at the bottom, we highlight kind of the areas where we know we can improve and drive some better performance on our employee engagement survey, primarily helping our employees connect to where we're trying to go as an organization. And so we are working on that as we speak, but we continue to remain very stable around inclusion, authenticity, accountability. The immediate manager rating is also really very high for our organization, meaning that our employees have very good working relationship with their next level manager, which is very important to note as well. Can we go to the second slide? Outside of overall favorability, which you saw on the previous slide, we do also look at employee engagement, and that is the connection that our employees have to the workplace. Engagement is a measure that many companies use because there's a lot of data that tells us about how engagement drives productivity in the workplace. If you look at where we are today, we still remain as an organization from an engagement perspective higher than many of our industry peers. And we still have opportunities with same size top quartile companies. Those are the companies that do show overall favorability in the top 25%. That's where their engagement is. So we have some places to shoot for. Largely, our opportunity is to move some of our moderately engaged employees to become more highly engaged, which is a different issue if we had to deal with a highly disengaged population, which unfortunately we do not. So we will be looking at how we can continue to drive high levels of engagement across our employee population. Let's go to our next slide. So this is, as we have looked at the data, as we've spent time with the executive leadership team at OPPD, sort of three high-level areas have come out that we're working on across the district. So the specific plans may look different in different departments and different teams. But in general, we're looking at how we can enhance our senior leader connection within the district, making sure our employees understand where we're going, why we're going there, and how they fit into that. And increasing that visibility of our ELT to deliver those messages, as well as enabling their direct reports to deliver those messages as well. We're going to continue to focus on career and professional development. I think Mikkel did a nice job of sharing all of the learning opportunities. We are doing, continue to do career work as well, all in an effort to help our employees feel like they can control and have some say in how they grow in the district and the kinds of roles they might take on in the future. And then the last one is we are introducing a lot of change into our organization, and we want to make sure that our people leaders are enabled and ready to be able to support their individual team members. So we are continuing to support through training, through leadership labs, circles, things that we're doing to try to help our leaders be the best support for their team members as we go through the change. And again, all of these came out of the last survey result. So Mikkel, I'll turn it back over to you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Next page, please. And we are wrapping it up. So here, each year we have an affirmative action plan done by an external vendor. And the results for 2022 really show these goals that we should have. So it identifies locations within the district, our different facilities, And really what we may be seeing there is a shortcoming, so to speak. So as we know, and this shouldn't be a surprise to us, as a matter of fact, we're looking at this to see if this is actually, or how useful this information is. So we have 22% of our population who are females, and we have 21% of our leadership team, and that is anyone who might be considered a leader of people who are females as well. But again, this is showing that we may not have a proportionate number of females or minorities that may be at certain locations. So we want to make sure again that this data makes sense to us. You know, I like looking at things in totality, and to the extent that we know that there are certain jobs that are limited, or there are certain locations that only have certain types of jobs, you know, none of this may for all intents and purposes really be a surprise to us. So I think this is something, while we're giving you this information, just know that we'll continue to look at this so that this information can be meaningful not only to us or to the board, but also to our employees. Next page, please. And so with that, as I turn it back over to Director Moody, this is the recommendation, and that's for acceptance. So Director Moody, I'll turn it over to you to either facilitate a Q&A session. If there are any other questions, we'll be happy to answer those. But ultimately, what we're looking for is acceptance of the monitoring report.
Okay, thank you, Mikkel. So quick housekeeping here. We'll have any additional questions around the monitoring report that you all have, comments, what have you, and then we don't have a slide for it, but we're still going to carve out time for any additional reflections, thoughts going forward. So we'll do that in a moment as well. So first things first, colleagues, any questions, comments for Mikkel and the team on this monitoring report? Not hearing any. I do have a couple. The focusing on the what for us, the primary measurable goal that we have in the SD is around top quartile performance. Can you give me a sense for how close or far we are from? I know that's a kind of that's the goal, but where are we as it relates to that? And I'm kind of curious, were we there last year, or give me some sense for kind of how we relate to our peers.
Nina?
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm happy to answer that. Sorry, my video just is kind of not happening, so sorry. But yes, so last year, Director Moody, we were right at the quartile, and you are right, the quartile shifts with the entire population. So depending on response rates, it goes down. Last year, we were right at it, so we were right in it. This year, we are about 2 points off, 2 to 3 points off. The final sort of where we are in the bucket will come out in the next couple of weeks, but I would anticipate somewhere in that 2 to 3 point range, which is by statistical kind of assessments, it would be considered statistically significant, but again, I have to wait for the final number, but we're about 2 or 3 points off. Okay, very good. Thank you.
And if I may offer just a comment, Director Moody, and I think this is important, at least my reflection when I got the survey results. There's so much work happening at the district. It is the amount of projects, the number, the complexity, the distribution, geographic distribution of projects, decommissioning a nuclear plant, transitioning the North Omaha station, building 2 new natural gas plants, procuring solar, transmission, all the work that's happening on the technology side. There is a lot happening, and I think part of our responsibility as executive team and my responsibility as CEO is to be incredibly intentional, connecting dots for employees. Employees know what they're working on, and they're working really hard. Sometimes it's hard to see the forest when you have so many trees in front of you, right? So my executive team and myself, we've been very intentional. There's going to be a lot more work for us going out and meeting with employees and talking about how are we connecting this vision that we've developed of Powering the Future 2050 to the work everyone is doing. Another aspect that is not lost on me is the trust element with the CEO and the executive leadership team. Well, half of the executive leadership team is relatively new, right? So I cannot expect the employee, all of the employees to get to trust us if they haven't even met some of us in some cases. So it's really going out and having field visits, and these becomes a little trickier because we still have quite a few people working remotely. So being very intentional about connecting executives with employees and connecting that vision we have of 2050 with the work we're doing today, it will be an incredible focus of me and the team going forward. That is my hope, that as we close that gap, there are many other elements for engagement, for sure, but that is one that is a focus of mine, and I hope that next year we can see improvements on this area as we are being intentional about connecting and raising that trust back to where it was a year or two ago.
Yeah, thank you for that, Javier. Yeah, trust is built over time, so it's steady work. Colleagues, any other want to leave space for any other questions or comments that you might have? Yes, Director Molhoff.
Yeah, so this is really great work, and I know that it probably feels like juggling cats at some point, but because of the very diverse areas of work that we have, but I'm happy to see the list, the long list of programs that we have that keep people engaged, and maybe this is a comment for the future, but you know, how do we measure whether each of those programs really keep people, really increase engagement and promote retention, and are there benchmarks that you use for these programs to make sure that we're monitoring which ones are successful and which ones really don't keep people engaged, and how our efforts at DEI really really do have an impact on our employees, and so I guess for the future, you know, I would like to think about how all of these great programs that you have, like the slide that you have for your I3 shows what the results are. You know, it would be really good to see what the results of all of these programs are in terms of benchmarks and retention and engagement. So it's a big ask, and so I know that Javier's on that, but really, you know, it's a great report, great monitoring report. I think that with some additional data points, it could be even better. So
we will make sure to include that next year, Director Mohoff. That's a fantastic point. I have actually talked to Michaela about this at length. We have all of those results. Graduation rates, for example, of our Accelerated Leadership Development Program, or ALDP. What are not only the graduation rate of all employees who enter the program, how many exit, but promotion rates. How many enter the program with one job title and are able to either move laterally or upwards in the organization. The percentage of engineers that go through those programs, the percentage of women and minorities. So we have a lot of that information, and I sense the hunger or the thirst for a little bit more of that. So we will make sure to include some of that next year for the report.
Yeah. Additionally, some of the other programs that you were talking about, the engagement I think that we see there is year after year of employees continue to engage in that way. Now, typically, we might not always have the attendance list, or we usually know exactly how many employees attend such a training, but I will tell you that there are programs that didn't make this list because they didn't make the cut. After a few months, either employees stop participating. So I think the value in a lot of our programs and the reason that they continue to be on this list is because employees continue to use these programs. So to Javier's point, yes, there is an abundance of data and things of that nature that might be helpful or useful to you in terms of understanding or having a greater appreciation for this. But thank you for that question. It's excellent. Excellent point.
Yeah, thank you, Director Mohawk. I'll just add that that's thinking about what the right balance of information provided in the report is something that would be valuable to have a conversation with the governance committee next year, so that we strike that right balance. Director Bogner, I see a hand.
Yeah, can you help me understand like the origin of like the affirmative action plan and how that is either the same or different than the DEI work that is happening?
The affirmative action plan is, you asked how is it different from the DE&I work?
Yeah, like where is the affirmative action plan? What's the origin of it? To be quite frank, I feel like that's an antiquated term, and I guess I just wonder what is driving us to continue to use that term here, and how is it different than DEI?
Oh, perfect. Then I think you appreciated the comments I made relative to this, because I am not sure. I don't think that this is going to be that useful, but it is written in our SD. So this may be something again for the governance committee and for the board to look at to see if we want to keep it, because to your point, there isn't really, as we look into the nuts and bolts of it, it's not going to be a significant difference. And again, what I highlighted was what is being shown here. And Christy, if you could go to page 13, which is where that is. It's showing us things, yes, that page. It's showing us things that either obvious to us and that we know already, and in some cases it may be, I don't know if there might be a lot of value in us even trying to solve for some of these things, to say that this is something we need to work on relative to either minorities or to females, etc. So I thoroughly and totally appreciate your question, because I'm with you.
So since it is all caps, affirmative action plan in the SD, I'm wondering, is there a formal document that is?
There is, well, we get a report from this company, and I get what you're saying, if that's referring to either a federal plan or something of that nature, which is where that may be the origins of it, even before any of us came on board. So again, I think there's an opportunity for us to examine that.
Okay, obviously, we probably need to come to a consensus that we want to talk about this, but maybe that's an item for us to put on the workshop discussion agenda, and we can circle back at that point. And I think that there's some value here in digging into what specifically the affirmative action plan is, and because it almost is worded as if it's a formal document that should be in an appendix or easily produced when asked here.
Yeah, Director Bogner, there is an affirmative action plan. I'll get with Mikkel Pinder. This has been in place for a long time. Sitting here right now, I'm not certain of the legal provision on which it's based. That would have required that or could have required that at some point. But we can look into that offline and come back to the board with that report.
Great, thank you, Steve. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I'll just hop in to reinforce the need to kind of examine whether or not that's board driven, if it's externally driven, whether or not it needs to be in the SD, is it meeting the need? I mean, the very first bullet in the SD is to develop and maintain a diverse and inclusive workplace, right? So it's clearly important, but what is the modality that we're using in order to tell us whether or not we're pursuing a diverse, or we're developing and maintaining such a workforce? So I think that question sort of flipped us over into any other reflections that we might have on this particular SD. So I see Director Yoder's hand popped up. Please go ahead, Rick.
Well, yeah, I think much of the discussion, that question and even Janice's comments are about, how, what can be done for improvements. I really liked Mikkel's opening statements about the Great Resignation and the quiet quitting and so forth, and providing some context for what the board should maybe not always year by year be trying to do, but I'm trying to figure out how to connect those dots between everything that we have here and what our long-term outcomes are. I guess the only thing I see is, to me, the OPPD shell, those sub-bullets there is a lot of what, and I think there are opportunities for improvement in how the SD can be written, but I won't be here to do it, so I'll just make that observation.
Thank you, Director Yoder. Other colleagues, other comments, reflections? I'm not seeing any additional hands. Okay, Mikkel, great report. Thank you. This has always been, for me, one of the SDs that I value the most. The people drive this organization. We've got a lot of equipment. We have a lot of big infrastructure, but without the people, none of that works. So this is one that for me personally is just, I think is extremely important for us as board members to keep an eye on. So thank you for the report. Thank you for the good work. That concludes SD8, which I believe concludes the governance committee report.
Thank you very much, Director Moody. We'll move on now to the Finance Committee. And Director Yoder, your final Finance Committee report of your term here at OPPD. Go ahead.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Well, it's there are 3 action items on this report, 2, 3, and 4 there, so that will be in discussion coming up. I guess the only thing I have to say about the rest of it is that we did have some discussion, as has been noted. My final day is January 4th. Is that right? Mr. Bruckner, he nods his head yes. And Craig touched on this in governance. There's a need to fill in the gap between that and the next meeting, and so Director Spurgeon is willing to step in as acting treasurer there for that time, and I think that's the only housekeeping element of note. So let's go ahead, and it's not, our agenda for this meeting is not the same as the agenda you see in front of you. So let's go ahead and, if we can, start talking about the final corporate operating plan up for an action item on Thursday. Mr. Bishop, can you help?
Good morning. Thank you, Director Yoder. I'm excited to advance forward the final corporate operating plan to the board. This will serve as a final touch point with the board. We'll request the board's approval this coming Thursday. The intent of this presentation is really to highlight the key elements of the 2023 plan. Again, last month we went through this in detail, so the goal is not to rehash that, but call out some of the major themes. Relative to what's transpired since last month, there's been no adjustments to the plan. So that's good news, nothing to report from that perspective, but I will highlight some of the pieces that are out there for review. Again, we've got the full presentation that's available for folks. We had a good discussion, robust question and answer at the end of the last meeting. For the past month, we've had the 2023 COP book, which gives a lot of different additional detail and granularity regarding the specifics of what drives the plan. over 60 pages. Again, a great resource. We've got the 2023 COP memo and then letters from Brattle regarding their independent review. The last piece we have out there for everyone's reading pleasure is the red line of the service regulations. Again, a great document. If you're ever short of things to read, it's fantastic. I enjoy it. It gives a lot of insights into the tariffs and how we, the products that we charge and provide to our customers. At the end of this presentation, I'll plan to ask the board for questions. And with that, I will go ahead and jump on in. All right, so we're requesting approval for a $1.9 billion budget for 2023. I'm going to call out the themes that we had highlighted in the full presentation. And there's really three that come to mind. The first is load growth. We continue to see substantial load growth, 100 megawatts per year or 6.8% year on year. And again, that provides us with a huge benefit in the past and also continues to provide a benefit for us in the future, especially as we think about what we're looking to advance forward, Power the Future 2050, and our strategic initiatives. The second item I'd call out is reliability. Again, as we continue to see that load growth, we've got to continue to invest in our T&D system, our generation infrastructure. More specifically, when we look at the large capital ask that we have here in terms of capital expenditures, we've got continue to invest in our Power with a Purpose projects to meet our load growth. Turtle Creek and Standing Bear Lake, those are the majority of the large ask relative to our capital expenditures. But we're also noting that we want to continue to enhance grid resiliency, so investing in our transmission and distribution system, substations, and also continue to invest in our employees that are required to attend to all of those facilities. In terms of strategic investments, that would be the third category I would highlight. Again, that's provided because of the load growth that we have. Absent that growth, it would be very difficult to invest in these initiatives, but for a rate increase. And I'll talk about the rate increase here, or the rate impact in just a moment. But those specific initiatives, and we've talked to the board about this in detail, so I'll go over these quickly. Investments in AMI, so two-way communication with our customers that will enable better knowledge of our outages, reporting and response times, better options for our customers in terms of how they consume our product. Investments in our critical technology backbone. Again, that's been underinvested over the course of time. We want to make sure that we're operating as efficiently and safely as possible. So that's a critical investment for us moving forward. Investing in our people and our workforce. Again, as Javier just highlighted, as well as Mikkel, our people are our number one priority. So making sure that we've got the right workforce transformation initiatives in place is key. Also investing in our facilities. That's lagged behind for many years. Not unique to us. You see that in a lot of other utilities, but that is a focus moving forward to make sure we've got the right facilities for our folks to operate in. And then just in general, investing in our other initiatives for our Power the Future 2050. So as it relates to our customers, what does this mean? Improved service, and then also rates. We want to know, what does this mean in terms of rate impact? And the good news there is as we talked about at the last presentation, there's no general increase. Again, that's a commitment that the team has put in terms of our focus and financial discipline to keep our rates as low as possible, in line with our mission statement. Again, we feel very fortunate from that perspective. Just as a few data points, and we talked about this in detail at the full presentation last month, but general inflation, again, in October at 8% annually. We also see the energy sector inflation roughly 17%. And then as I talked about EIA, when you look specifically in the average utility, the utility space relative to average increase, May 2021 through May 2022, the average increase across the nation is 11%. So we feel very fortunate that we don't have a general rate increase. One item that we do have will be, we're proposing a fuel and purchase power adjustment. We don't take this lightly, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more in the rates section. But really what's driving this is the large increase that we've seen in the wholesale markets, fuel and purchase power. We've talked about that throughout this year, both in our quarterly updates as well as the detailed COP. Again, we're seeing some fairly sizable increases that, again, this mechanism is meant to capture as we see prices go up and down, we pass those along to customers as a price of the service that we provide to them. With that, let's go to the next slide. This is a different view, and one that we actually got out of a suggestion from a board member. We typically approach this when we're looking at capital. We decided to do it with all of our expenditures, and again, really breaking down, you know, what's required for current operations versus what's transformative. So thank you for the recommendation on that. As we look at the largest driver, again, 76% of that's for current operations. As we look at that, support for current operations is 49%. This is the people and the cost for keeping the lights on, our costs for power, O&M, so commodity costs, labor costs, crews, customer service. Again, that's the largest portion, 49%. As we look at other current expenditures, 17%, again, that's what I'd call is the cost of doing business. So things that we worry about on our side, depreciation, decommissioning, debt service, pilot payments. And then as we look at, lastly, capital and support of current assets are 10%. And really that's maintaining and reinvesting our current assets. That's something we want to make sure that we're focused on so we can keep a reliable system in our T&D systems, technology, facilities. Those are the things that we need to make sure that we're adequately reinvesting in. Lastly, on the transformation side, you know, as we think the categories generation growth, strategic priorities, and other capital expansion. Here we've got our power with a purpose. Again, that's been an item of focus for us. That'll continue through this budget cycle as we focus on making sure that we've got the ability to serve the growth today, but also in the future. AMI is in there as well. Again, we've talked through that in detail, meet our customers' needs, increase communication, responsiveness, and providing them with additional options. And we've also included dollars for our master's facility plan. Let's go on to the next. I'm actually going to have you go 2 slides ahead. So as we talked about, there's no general rate increase, but we do are asking within the COP to include a fuel and power purchase adjustment that's inherent to what's being proposed. Again, what's driving this? We're seeing increased costs in the wholesale markets. In the presentation that we provided last month, I think a notable item was when we look at what is shifting in terms of cost, we see that plan on plan natural gas prices are going up 121%. We also see that our power prices for peak and off peak are going up 30 to 40%. Again, those are the drivers of what's causing that. If they come down, that will adjust as well. Again, it's very common within the utility space. And again, it's meant to be a mechanism to pass along the costs of power and the product that we're providing to our customers. Relative to it, again, there's just a couple of key pieces. This has been around since 2011. It's rate rider number 461. It incorporates by formula, it allows us to recover our costs for fuel, purchase power with an offset from off-system sales. That's a new element that we added last year. The mechanics of it are this: we've got 2 mechanisms that come into place: the base rate, which is included in our general rates, and then we also have an FPPA factor, and that's what's causing the adjustment here as we see fluctuations in fuel and purchase power. And again, that's based upon customer usage, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more here in a moment. But again, we're proposing to increase that factor from 0.186 cents per kilowatt hour to 0.48 cents per kilowatt hour to effectively recover our cost of providing energy to our customers. That would be effective January of 2023. And ultimately would be an increase to customers as a collective 2.9%. And again, we'll go through what that means on an individual for the individual customer classes. If we can go back 1 slide. Here's how that breaks out. So average increase by customer class. You're going to see that the largest impact is going to be on our C&I customers. And that's because when we think through it, they have both an energy and a demand charge, but since this is energy dependent and they're heavy consumers from an energy consumption perspective, as it relates to a portion of their typical bill, that's where you'll see an elevated impact across the board for our commercial industrial customers. One of the items I would highlight, though, it impacts all customers, is the usage profile is what will impact ultimately what customers are paying in this regard. So if customers are looking to consume less, they will also have less of a charge as well. So they do have some ability to impact how this impacts their monthly bill. Let's go forward 2 slides, please. All right, we've hired Brattle on behalf of the board, again, to put an independent set of eyes both on our rate proposal as well as the COP. It's not required, definitely a best practice, and gives the board additional assurance as they have an independent set of eyes looking at the results. Relative to the corporate operating plan, again, there's no issues that were noted. They had highlighted in the report that we followed prudent utility practices, had talked about some different elements of items that and observations they have relative to others in the industry, and elements that are unique to us as OPPD. So always good to see the comments that they have. And then relative to the rate proposal, they look to make sure that we have a fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory package that's being produced that follows state statute. Again, that our rates are fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory. All right, let's move on to the next slide, please. Lastly, we want to make sure that we're in alignment with our vision. So as we look to make sure that we're providing affordable, reliable, and environmentally sensitive energy services to our customers, we believe the COP is completely aligned with that, and want to just reaffirm that relative to SD1, we're in full alignment from our perspective with what we're proposing for the COP. All right, I'll open it back to you, Director Yoder, and to the board for questions.
Okay, I think I'm prepared. Oh, see, Director Kavanaugh has his hand up. Director Kavanaugh.
Thanks, Rick. Could we go back to the what am I trying to say? To the last photo that deals with the rate increases by class. To the slide, I should say.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. Hey, Jeff. In previous years, we've been provided the information as far as, obviously the reason for the difference in the levels of increases to keep keep each class close to what our actual cost is. Do we have those actual figures to show how close we are in each of these categories to where we should be, I guess, if you will? Are we right on target with each of them, or are some of them still off? I know there's a couple of different ones where we were off by quite a bit, and it took a few years for us to get back, to par, if you will.
No, that's a great question. I don't have that at hand, Director Kavanaugh, but I'll see if Beth Hoyle or Brad Sire have that information.
Okay, if you do find, I just want to make sure that they're all close to being, I don't know what the term would be, I guess, close to being even par, if you will, or if we're still got a ways to go. Thank you.
We'll gather that information and get that to you. Thank you.
If I may, Director Kavanaugh, that's a great question. I think it's worth emphasizing that this is a fuel and purchase power adjustment, which is tied to the energy consumption, not the demand consumption. Where things get a little trickier and it's harder to match is when you're talking about the base rate, the general rate, demand. These one I would say is probably a lot cleaner and easier to translate because it's truly just the energy part of it that is tied to the fuel and purchase power adjustment. But to Jeff's point, we can get you that information separately, but I wouldn't expect this particular increase to be that different from exactly what it needs to be, because it's, again, very tied to the energy consumption.
Right. That's a good point, Javier. I may misspoke there, but I appreciate that.
Okay, Mike, thank you. And thank you all for answering that. Director Bogner.
Part of our packet is basically the board action letter that lays out purpose and facts. And so I'm looking at item D, as in dog, related to total sales and retail versus or total sales, which comprises of retail sales, which we're expecting an increase on, and then wholesale revenues, which we're expecting a decrease. And so it says 8.4% decrease from projected 2022 amount, which is exclusive of NC2 participation sales, but then the NC2 participation sales are expecting to be a 16.2% decrease from, I would assume that is intended to say from the projected 2022 amount. Help me understand for these wholesale revenue decreases and the NC2 participant sale decrease, like what's driving those decreases from this calendar year?
That's a great question, and one we've received in other channels as well, Director Bogner. The largest piece that's coming into play is when we look at NC1 and NC2, the amount of outage work that we're doing is greatly increasing in 2023. So as a result, we'll have less ability to sell off that generation into the marketplace. So you'll see a decline relative to the amount of megawatts that we're able to put into the marketplace, and correspondingly record as our off-system sales. So that's the largest piece. Part of our regular cycled maintenance that we're seeing a great increase. And I can provide you, as we continue through, I'll send you a note on specifically what that means in terms of the increase in days. I think it's almost a 75% increase in the amount of outage days that we're seeing.
All right, thank you. That addresses my question. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Director Bogner, CFO Bishop. Other questions from other directors? Not seeing any hands. So I just want to thank the team for a great job in putting together this corporate operating plan. A couple things I wanted to say. I wanted to point out for the public especially, and other members of the board who have sometimes asked about this, that page 6 on the book, the corporate operating plan, does have a great summary of Powering the Future 2050, that strategic vision. And so if you're wanting to have your hands on something that you can carry around in your hip pocket so you know what the vision is, it's right there. Also really happy there's no general rate increase. See, we talked about the FPPA, that's good. Oh, last thing is that Brattle letter, I asked if it was public, kind of new, just making the point. It does include comments from Brattle about things that we should watch for. They asked the question and the questions were answered, but you know, kind of giving the board things that it ought to be looking at in this coming year. So again, something for the board to keep in mind, because you know, we got to shoulder some responsibility here too, but the team's doing a great job. All right. Next item then is one we did not talk about in Finance Committee. The full reveal will be here. It's the Declaration of Anticipated 2023 Capital Expenditures Reimbursement. Mr. Bishop.
Thank you, Director Yoder. Hopefully this one looks familiar to folks. It's we ask for this annually. We will be requesting board action. So just from a background perspective, this has been going on for 10 years. It's tied to our COP when we get that approved. And what we're trying to address with this is relative to our tax exempt debt, there are restrictions on the amount of investment income that you're able to receive from proceeds from an issuance. This is an IRS requirement associated specific to tax exempt debt, since we don't pay taxes on it. The solution and how we're able to avoid it is by using our cash position. We pay for our capital investments, and then when we do the issuance, we replenish ourselves. And by doing that, we don't have to go through and do a number of different tests. It saves time and energy, and so really just an efficiency. Again, the ask is for authorization from the board to allow us to reimburse ourselves cash for the 2023 capital program when we issue debt later in 2023. So again, a IRS requirement that we're able to avoid by doing this. So you'll note that the $640 million ties back directly to our capital program. And again, this is just an annual requirement that we take to the board to seek their approval to move forward and again, avoid a bunch of additional work that's required if we weren't to follow this process. It's eloquent from my perspective. I had not seen it before I got to OPPD. So feather in the hat to whoever developed that 10 years ago.
Okay, any questions from members of the board?
And I would add on this one, since I was doing these a few years ago, this is a fantastic testament to OPPD's financial strength. The fact that we can fund capital programs in advance with cash and wait until we absolutely need to replenish that cash to issue debt, it's something that not all utilities are able to do. So whenever you have other utilities who may not have the financial strength we do, where they have to issue debt well in advance so that they can then use those proceeds for capital expenditures. That means that they have to incur in interest expenses earlier than what OPPD has to do. So this is, again, it's something that happened even before I was CFO, and it's a strength, a financial strength that continues to pay dividends for the district in the form of lower interest expenses, especially in this era with higher interest rates. This will be a very welcome flexibility for the district.
Outstanding. Thanks for the additional color there, Javier. Any questions, comments from other directors? Okay, well, let's move on to the final item that'll be an action item. That's the changes on SD2. Am I managing this, or? And that's fine. I just got to get to it. So we have the committee came up with some recommended changes for SD2. This is in essence in kind of an interim change, because there's this ongoing effort to collect public comment with the ongoing rates principles discussion. And so this is a stepwise refinement. And I think thanks to everyone who worked on it, and I hope the board supports the change. I don't have anything further to say about it. Other members of the committee, or Scott, who's the master of the process?
Do you want me to walk through the changes, Director Yoder, or how?
Oh, there. I'm sorry, Director. I'm sorry, CFO Bishop. Yeah, that'd be great.
I will defer to you, Jeff.
Scott, you've been instrumental as well. I don't want to steal the flame if you'd like.
Oh, it's all your lead, sir. I will fill in if you need me to.
Okay. So in terms of the material, so this is the existing directive that stands today. So again, focus on rates and affordability. It gives us a directional target, 20% below the benchmark. Again, we've talked about that quite extensively. One is the benchmark appropriate of 20%. And then also the benchmark itself in the states that compile it, the West North Central region, a lot of questions about the applicability. And so that's been, again, our discussion relative to the existing SD. From a process perspective, if we go to the next slide, again, these are quick steps, but again, we get it on the work plan. This one was added to the work plan again back in August of 2020. And then it goes over, once it's agreed to at the all committee level, then we move forward with steps 2 through 5, which is in the committee. The chair and the CEO prioritized the work. It was added to the plan, to the work plan in 2021, April of 2021. Step 3 is where management works on the policy as directed by the CEO and the board president. And then we recently had come to steps 4 and 5. This was completed in November with the review and the finalization by the committee chair and the committee. That was again completed in November. These last steps, board review, public comment, and vote. Board review is happening today. So we've got that going on. Public comment has happened November 28th through December 11th, and then ultimately we'll be taking this to vote, again, from a process perspective, this coming Thursday. We can go to the next slide, please. Oh, there you go. Sorry for the, you can see the dates. There we go. Apologies about that. If we go to the next slide. So we've got a red line and a clean version of what's proposed. What's being changed is taking the target from 20% down to 10%. Relative to where we've landed historically, that's a much more achievable and aspiring target for us relative to 10% versus 20. The benchmark itself, going from the west, north, central, which includes North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska. Some questions around the impact climatically that played relative to consumption or rates was in question. There was a project that was done by our rates and pricing and rates team to come up with a series of new states, which would be Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, Nebraska, Missouri, and South Dakota. Again, from a climatic perspective, much more in alignment with Nebraska. And then lastly, some new wording regarding providing affordable service and setting rates to achieve the organization's long-term targets was placed up top, and a little bit of rejiggering in terms of format. I don't know, Scott, if not to call you up, any other thoughts? I know you were instrumental in some of the reformatting.
No, I appreciate that. Brilliantly recapped. I have nothing to add.
Thanks, Scott. And then we've got the next slide, if you don't mind. Again, here's just some more of the process that's been followed, the board feedback process, November 28th through December 11th. Just different outreach, which was done. Not a lot of feedback at this point about the specific revisions that have been proposed. As of yesterday, I believe we got the update from Public Affairs Communications. I think we had no comments that had been received from the public on the proposed changes. And with that, let's go to the next slide. I think that's where we're at right now in terms of option 1 and option 2.
Okay. Thank you very much, CFO Bishop. Really appreciate your managing us through those slides. Other directors, comments? Questions?
Let's vote.
Let's do that. That's the recommendation from the Finance Committee, is to move it to board resolution and vote. Yes, Mr. Director Williams.
Yeah, to be clear, I agree with that. I guess my question is about anticipated next steps. You mentioned this was an interim update. And so as a reminder for everyone, the rate workshops that we had are helping us to anticipate future updates to SD2. Is that correct? Do we have a projected timeline, or is that to be determined next year? Just making sure we understand where we're headed from here after this interim update is completed.
No, I like your question about a process check. CFO Bishop, can you help us with that?
Yeah, I know Brad's been working on that in detail. Brad Sire, can you help me with that?
Yeah, a couple of different comments that I'd offer. First, roughly around the end of the first quarter is when we'll be receiving the final report that was an outcome of the board workshops that start talking about the kind of the what. So what did we hear during the workshops, and what do we want to get on both a short-term and long-term roadmap? The second piece that I'd offer was conversation that was had in the Finance Committee towards the end of the committee meeting when we talked about the work plan, and I'd characterize it this way. The revision that we're seeing today, we consider to be one scope of work in regard to SD2 revision. And then we talked about getting another scope of work on the Finance Committee work plan, really, that forward-looking work that you're talking about, Director Williams. So that's my initial thoughts. The other thing I would bring you back to is during those board workshops, we kind of talked about a scope of work being the SD2 revision, the other scope being those rate principles, and how do we find where those two circles kind of interconnect. And that's where my mind goes when I talk about getting another scope of work on the Finance Committee's work plan. Over.
Great. Yeah, I appreciate the clarification there, and I know we'll talk about that in board work plan later, but just that we are doing some work now. I just want to be clear that before we approve some changes without other potential changes that we have discussed, we understand where that's coming up. So thanks for the reminder on that, and I look forward to that discussion in the future. And yes, again, I agree. We should approve this resolution and these changes now. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity to clarify, and thank you everyone for making that clarification. With that, seeing no other hands raised, no other comments, I believe the Finance Committee report is complete. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, we're at 11:37. I'm just returning my agenda here. We are going to move now into systems management and nuclear oversight. Director Williams, will you provide our chair report?
Great, thanks very much. The Systems Management and Nuclear Oversight Committee did meet. A couple directors were unavailable at the scheduled virtual meeting time, and so 2 other directors were able to join us. So 4 of us had a good discussion. The primary topic was about decarbonization and resource planning. There was not a lot of other action planned for the Systems Committee that needed pre-committee meeting discussion, and so we took this opportunity to have some of those additional discussions about the methodologies for decarbonization and specifically calculations on net zero as we look toward the future. We talked about a large number of commonalities between OPPD's decarbonization plan and recent findings from national decarbonization work, specifically from the Electric Power Research Institute, or EPRI. And then lastly, the fact that our communities continue to ask for more energy. We talked about that a little bit earlier today, that the increasing demands, load growth overall, means that our resource planning and decarbonization needs to anticipate where we will be in the future. I felt it was a very helpful discussion. I hope the other directors who were able to attend also found that helpful. The slides were made available to both the 2 directors from the committee who were not able to join us and other directors. And if you have not had a chance, I would encourage you to take a look at that. I found it, again, very helpful to anticipate where we see things moving forward with system planning, integrated system planning, as the SD is now titled, and our resource adequacy overall. So, Brad and Lisa, did you have any additional comments that you wanted to make about the upcoming State of the Utility workshop that we talked about, which is scheduled for tomorrow afternoon?
Yeah, thank you so much, Director Williams. We're excited because once again, we're going to be doing a State of the Utility tomorrow afternoon from 4 to whenever we finish. All of the public is invited to attend. We'll be giving an update on decarbonization, what we've been doing on AMI, some of the other components, and of course, North Omaha. So appreciate the engagement by the public and look forward to having everybody join in on the WebEx. It is on OPPD.com and OPPD Community Connect. Brad, anything you'd like to add?
Fantastic summary. Thank you, Lisa and Dr. Williams.
Great, thanks very much. So yeah, that was a discussion from the committee meeting. We do have action items that were scheduled for this meeting that we did not discuss in great length because we considered them nothing proprietary that needed to be in closed session. And so first we have a Nuclear Oversight Committee report, and let's move to that now, and then we'll get to those 2 scheduled Systems Committee action items in a little bit. So Tim, I see your name here. Are you there to give us this report?
I am here. Good morning. If we could go to the next slide, please. Just as a preview of what we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about what we've accomplished in 2022. We're going to look ahead to 2023 and even 24 through 26. Then we're going to talk about cost and schedule performance, and then certainly whatever questions or other topics you'd like to talk about, I'll be glad to take those. Next slide, please. When we talk about accomplishments, the first thing we have to start with is safety because it is our #1 priority. And we use the picture of the dry fuel storage area as a reminder of the organization that's providing safe, secure storage of that spent fuel 24/7. And we don't hear a lot about it, but they are doing great work out there and making sure that each and every day we're meeting all of our regulations. I'm also proud that we've had no challenges to nuclear or radiological or environmental safety this year. One area where we were doing good until last month was in the industrial safety area. And we did have one of our subcontractor employees injured, and it's still going through final classification, but it's at least a days away restricted or transfer time injury. And that really reinforced with us the danger of the work we're doing and how fast something can happen when you're using this big equipment to demolish structures. And that is the second one that we've had since we really began the active deconstruction in 2019. So we had a pretty good run. We'll learn from this and we'll get better and continue forward. Next slide, please. All year long, I've been coming and talking about reactor vessel segmentation, internal segmentation. This is just about the last time you're going to hear about that because we have completed the cutting of the internals, which is what we were targeting by the end of this year. This picture shows that last remaining section there, kind of to the right with all the holes in it. All that cutting is complete. It's being packaged up. Then we'll be demobilizing the equipment, cleaning up the area, and then starting to mobilize into the next project, which will be reactor vessel segmentation. The graph to the right, we've been keeping up with the shipping as we're going with this. That orange slice is what is left to still be shipped off. That's from a couple of weeks ago. I can tell you that as of today, that slice is about half as big. So that work is going on safely and on schedule. Next slide, please. And then there will not be a test later on which buildings are where and the names of them, but just wanted to level set people on where we were when before we started decommissioning. I'll point out two things. To the upper right, the green arrow is the fuel storage area. That's before it was expanded. And then the blue arrow towards the left, which is the containment structure. And those will kind of be the things to help orient yourself as we're going to these next slides. Next slide, please. So this is where we began this year. You can see in the upper right where that spent fuel storage facility was, dry fuel storage facility. That was expanded out. That fuel was finished being moved in 2022. And then you can see in the power block, a lot of those structures, the support structures had been removed. But the auxiliary building, which is on three sides of containment, the turbine building, still intact. That work had been on the inside of those structures. And it's not in the picture, but the intake structure still remained as well. Well, if we go to the next slide, we'll fast forward to where we are as of a few weeks ago. Those structures are effectively gone. Starting at the bottom, the intake structure is down to grade. We're working on clearing out that basement. The turbine building's in the same state. All that's left to do with it is basically remove the rubble that's inside the basement footprint at this time. And then the auxiliary building, the reason I used the arrow there was to, I know depth perception is hard on the picture, but 2/3 of that structure, not only is it down to grade, but the material's been removed from the basement area as well. So it was just this one side where we're still removing material. And as of today, that's roughly 75% removed as well. So a lot of work has been done this year. Now, what you see left in the picture is the containment structure and then the temporary structure to control access in and out, which is a nice way for me to emphasize from a pictorial and a skyline changing. This is the excitement for the next couple of years because the work now will be going on inside of containment. And if we could go to the next slide, please. That is our segue into what's coming up in the future. Next slide, please. So for 2023, now that we've completed the cutting up of the internals, now we'll transition to cutting up the reactor vessel itself. And that does take the vast majority of 2023. Late third quarter, early fourth quarter, that project will wrap up. In parallel with that, and just as important from an administration standpoint, is the license termination plan. That license termination plan ultimately becomes the document that we agree to or the NRC approves for ultimate unrestricted release of the site. So all the things that we're going to meet, how we're going to meet them, so that in the end, when we can say this site can be released for whatever uses it's determined to be. And I would just reinforce that that does not include the dry fuel storage area. That area will stay under license and oversight of NRC until that fuel is moved sometime in the future. Next slide, please. So after 2023, and we remove or cut up the reactor vessel itself, then it's removing everything else from inside of containment. And we've removed a few things already, but mostly just stuff that we needed to move to make room to do the other work. So there are almost all the major components that were inside a containment when we shut down are still there. So that's effectively a year's worth of work there. Once that work is done, then that allows us to take down the containment structure. The last shipment of waste material will be completed from site. And when I come and do my reports, I talk about being substantially complete by 2025. Well, there's a definition that goes along with that. So certainly it's a lot like it sounds. We're almost done, but we're not quite done. But the key portion of it is the radiological components have been removed from site. So we still might be moving dirt. We'll certainly still be doing surveys and paperwork, but the radiological components other than the dry fuel facility have been removed from site. And that's still what we're shooting for by the end of 2025. Next slide, please. So what's that opened up? That opens up getting to unrestricted use of the site. And our goal here is to get to achieve that by the end of 2026. There's some things that we control and there's some risks that are a little bit outside of our control. The things that we control is getting to substantial completion, completing all of our site surveys, and completion of all the license termination plan related documentation. And I very intentionally added with quality behind each one of those, because if we rush those and don't do them with quality, it will delay the rest of the project. A delay of poor work there is probably weeks worth of recovery on the end. So all those things have to be done with quality. From an external factors, it is the regulatory resources for the independent surveys and the documentation review. Certainly the NRC has the operating plants they provide oversight for. They have the other decommissioning plants, and it's where our need lines up with where other needs are and the resources to support all of those items. And to mitigate that, we do have routine meetings with the project manager from the NRC, so they know what our schedule looks like and we know what their schedule looks like, to ensure that we're working together to achieve what each of us needs to achieve to ultimately release the site. And then right on cue last night, Mother Nature helped me out with my last one here, and it's weather impacts. The rain last night and today is certainly going to slow up the outside work that we had planned for this week. But this really points more towards the end of the project. Imagine that rain was snow instead. If there's 6 inches, a foot of snow covering the site, that certainly impacts the ability to do both our internal and our independent surveys. So nothing that we'll use an excuse, but something that we have to factor in as we move forward. Next slide, please. And that does get us to the cost and schedule performance discussion. And we'll go to the next slide and we'll start with schedule. So I've already talked about that near-term critical path work, the reactor vessel internal segmentation. That is on track. The cutting is complete. Now it's just a matter of packaging it up, demobilizing the equipment, and transitioning to the next phase. If you take that and those buildings that we've completed this year, a lot of work is behind us, and that is now going to get us into effectively transitioning to the next phase. So certainly it's the reactor vessel, and that will be our critical path work. But there's still a lot of other work that has to be done on site. And so now it's our opportunity to start really diving into those topics. How can we lay out the sequence? What's the scope look like? All those opportunities will move the schedule left and right. Today, the schedule still says substantial completion by the end of 2025. There is potential for that to ebb and flow a month or two either direction as we work through those. But as we make one change, then we look at other options to mitigate schedule impact if there is. So ultimately what I'm saying there is that I think sometimes when I come in and say on time and on budget, I'm doing a disservice by not giving a little more detail behind the effort that it takes to stay on schedule and on budget. It's nothing that we can just walk through on a day. It takes a lot of active engagement by a lot of people. And then the closely related topic of cost. So we are on budget for this year and we will end the year on budget. And then if you look broader to the project from the beginning of in 2019, when we started deconstruction until when we expect to be done, that estimate at completion, which we update every month, is still on track to meet our original estimate. So that's not easy either. A lot of work there as well, but that is on track for meeting our budget. Next slide, please. And the last item I have, I just wanted to show a couple of pictures. This is from this summer when the Rock Blair event was held in conjunction with the Habitat for Humanity. And these pictures show not only OPPD employees, which supported from all over the district, but one of these individuals is an employee of one of our contractors. And we had different subcontractor employees, all giving back in some small show of appreciation for the support that we continue to receive from the community. And with that, I will take any questions.
And Tim, if I may, Director Williams, and before questions, I would like to just make a comment here. And I hope this is evident by Tim's report. The work that the Fort Calhoun Station team has done and will continue to do is nothing short of amazing. It seems relatively easy. You're dismantling a station as opposed to building one, but goodness, it is incredibly complicated. The amount of work and laser focus on safety that Tim has injected in his team is just amazing. I want to take a moment to call out Tim's leadership team, Andy Barker, Craig Longwood, Ted Main, and Dave Weaver, and everyone who reports under these individuals. It is amazing. I had an opportunity to meet earlier this year. We had a team from the NRC, including a commissioner from the NRC, visiting the site, and we were chatting. And the positive comments, the amazing comments that they had to the team to say, "Hey, you guys are doing an amazing job." There were a few comments related to funding of a nuclear decommissioning project and how well we're doing, and comments about how they want to use us as a base case for future decommissioning projects. So I know Tim is very humble, and he may not want to say this, but I want to publicly recognize him and his team for the amazing work they do. I would say this, the last thing I'll say is that the Fort Calhoun Station team really has set the standard for world-class execution of projects for the rest of the district. And we're looking up to those teams for that is how you execute projects. So I'll stop talking and bragging, but I wanted to take the opportunity to recognize in public.
Great, thank you, Javier, for the additional information. And I've heard all of the same wonderful comments from the outside people who have been involved in the process as well during the DOC exit meetings. So yeah, again, kudos to everyone who's been involved. Excellent performance around the organization. I see comments from Director Mulhoff. Let's start there.
Okay. So yeah, and thanks, Javier. I just want to echo everything that you said. That's exactly what I was going to say, really, because I know the kind of Herculean effort that it has taken to, on time and on budget is something that we don't hear often anywhere in these days, especially with supply chain issues and all of the personnel, employee issues. Mr. Euling, I just am so grateful for your leadership up there and for all that you do, not just at Fort Calhoun, but for the Blair community as a whole. So thank you for your work up there, and appreciate this update. It's always impressive to see your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Bogner.
Sure, I have a question, and then I'll make a comment. I know in years past we've had, I would say, staggered staff decreases. Is there anything planned for 23 from that standpoint?
We do currently have a staffing reduction plan for late third quarter 2023. And we will continue to evaluate whether that's necessary and what that looks like. Right now, that would impact approximately 15 people.
Okay, very good. And the comment that I'll make, I'll echo and underscore an exclamation point, the thanks for the solid work up there. It is not easy. It is not taking apart a Lego set. It is meticulous and detailed, and then you add the complication of nuclear waste on top of that, and everything is amped up 1000%. And so I just want to reiterate and echo my fellow board members in saying thank you for all of the effort, and looking forward to a very very good report this time next year, as well as you accomplish some of those milestones. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Troy. I'd just like to add to something you just said, Amanda. Like, one of the things that's been really impressive to see Tim and his leadership do as we transition this facility is to find ways for employees at Fort Calhoun to have exposure in other parts of our company and to prepare for transition. We've been very, very successful in that transition to most of our meter techs and most of our project management staff and several other areas are now folks that have transitioned from Fort Calhoun. And a lot of that has to do with the intentional leadership of this team and the effort they've put to make sure that we transition as many employees as we can. So we don't talk about that a lot, but I definitely wanted to highlight that because I think that's exceptional and not necessarily something that you would see in other organizations going through a similar event.
Dr. Spurgeon, do you have comments or questions?
No questions, but I can't let this report go by without adding my appreciation for all the work that has gone on at Fort Calhoun and continues to go on. It is astonishing. So thank you so much. So appreciate everyone's continued work in a really difficult job. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great. I think that's all of the hands there. My comments earlier were short to make sure and allow space for other directors to jump in as well. But again, yes, thank you to Tim, your team, and everybody who's been involved. I happened to drive by on the highway over the weekend, and the visible change from the highway looking east down toward the site on the river is noticeable since the last time I was there. Essentially, just the reactor building and the large white tent in front. So yeah, it is a visible change at the site and documentation of all the great work that staff has been doing and the contracted employees have been doing for years and will continue to do. So again, Tim, thank you for the wonderful report now and the projection of what we should expect over the next year and the following year. Looking forward to successful completion of all of the work there and the transition to where OPPD is headed in the future following the completion of that work. So with that, I believe that completes the nuclear oversight report, and we do have 2 action items to discuss today. So I believe that that is a transition to Troy to present the action items for consideration.
Thank you, Director Williams. We do have 2 items. The first one is related to proactive asset management and reliability work, seeking to understand where our assets are and trying to find solutions before we have failures. The second is more of a regulatory item, and we'll move to that after we discuss the first one here. And so what we're looking for is to issue a contract for the purchase of air preheater baskets and seal material for North Omaha Unit 4 air preheaters. And what that equipment does is it allows for the transfer of heat and is part of the combustion process as that facility produces megawatts. The preheater I'm glad we got the picture up. The preheater is about 20 feet in diameter, just to kind of give you a size, and about 250,000 pounds. So pretty good size piece of equipment to work on. This equipment is needed for both now as well as post-conversion when we change the fuel. I thought of you, Director Mulhoff, when I was thinking about my notes for this. So it serves multiple points. And I will also say the existing baskets and seals, after watching them for a few years and making sure that we're keeping an eye on them via inspection, we have noted they are at the end of their expected life. So I think the last time we replaced these baskets was around 2014. So good asset management focus, trying to take care of things before they become a larger problem later on. The outage time for this is likely fall of 2023. And you'll see an installation labor contract come later, likely in the March timeframe of 2023. We did receive 1 bid. The bid was determined to be legally and technically responsive. It was we would consider it a pretty good bid based upon engineers' estimates, in line with what we'd expect. And I will say Arvos also provided an alternate bid, which was slightly less than the baseline. There's been some new changes in design that's allowed for some small cost savings, but there's data to support that the performance of this is just as good as the equipment that it's replacing. We've used this company before for these type of replacements. They've always done a fantastic job. We've never had any issues with their product, and the company is based out of New York. And with that, I will open it up for any questions you may have.
Great. Troy, you mentioned that we've got one item here and we anticipate an installation labor contract recommendation in the future. Can you talk about why that is a contracted type of labor?
Absolutely. So as we look at outages, we try to fit as much work as we can while the unit's off, looking at preventive maintenance and things of that nature. And so we have other work that will be assigned to our internal staff. There's also some specialty requirements around skill and knowledge related to this particular type of replacement, which just is also a need to find that external talent to be able to do some of that work. So when we take a generator off, we try to get as much stuff done as we possibly can within the shortest window possible. You know, keeping in mind, you know, staff hours and things of that nature. So hopefully that answers your question, Director Williams.
Yep, and I recognize that's not directly related to the item today, but you indicated a future item, so appreciate that. Director Molhoff, I did see your hand flash up and then come down. Did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, that was kind of my question is, you know, this only covers the equipment, not the installation. So there'll be additional expense on that. And so, but Troy, just to kind of bounce off of your comments, as we heard in the COP presentation, outage days equal revenue loss. So appreciate everything, Troy, that your team does to make sure that these units get back online as soon as possible and safely, and make sure that we are doing everything that we can to preserve those assets so that we don't have unplanned outages and during times when we have higher demand, which is not in those shoulder months. So thanks, Troy, to your team for being proactive on this and for making sure that these units are online as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. I don't see or hear any additional questions. Troy, I apologize if I missed, you mentioned one bid. Do you have a dollar amount from the bid on this one?
It should be on the document, but yes, it's $513,914.
Great. Appreciate that. Yes, I do see some part of that in the document, but just wanted to clarify as part of the discussion today. Thank you. So again, not hearing any additional comments or questions, I think we can anticipate this is ready for a vote for approval on Thursday. And I believe you have a second recommended item as well.
Absolutely. So this second item, we are seeking approval to negotiate. So I want to highlight that, negotiate for the design and supply of replacement traveling water screens and related equipment for installation at both of our Nebraska City and North Omaha stations, which uses intake water from the rivers for their cooling. And so from a context standpoint, several years ago, OPPD started working with EPRI in the industry to test different types of technologies to help inform the industry and to enhance fish protection as that water is being taken from rivers. And it was, you know, it's definitely related to the work done in the Clean Water Act, and which has driven a lot of focus in this area among utilities. And going through that process provided a lot of learnings for us on how to think about this going forward. I also want to highlight, just take a moment, you know, Lisa and her environmental team have done just a wonderful job staying connected, internal, external discussions, and driving excellence in this area. So I just wanted to highlight that. I'm talking about it, but it takes a lot of effort behind the scenes to to navigate these waters. OPPD also worked readily with the NDE to determine best available technology for this type of work. And after that collaboration, it will be in our permit going forward, and we must have this work completed by January 1st of 2026 to maintain regulatory compliance. And so you'll see a picture here, which I think this picture's changed a little bit from the last one I saw. But really what it does is for smaller fish that could be sucked into the intake, and usually that's the case. It's very, very small, kind of fingerling type size fish that can get sucked in. What this does is allows them to be screened and then put very gently back into the river system without harm. And so there's, as you can imagine, there's some complexity that comes with that. It takes some pretty significant systems to make that happen. But it's an important part of our commitment, on the environmental front. The district's engineer has looked at this, and there's a lot of complexities and differences between each individual unit and the systems and the supporting systems that it's going to take to integrate with for this to be a successful project. And so based upon that, there's a need for us to be able to sit down and have deeper conversations with vendors to be able to come to the best possible customized solution for this particular situation. And so what we're asking the board to do is to allow us to go out and have these discussions. There's probably 2, 3, maybe 4 companies that kind of specialize in this area. So there's a group of vendors that we'll definitely be having some pretty detailed conversations with, but we are looking to negotiate that as part of this contract. And with that, I will open it to questions.
Great. Troy, it's listed at the top here that this is for both North Omaha 4 and 5 and Nebraska City. So this is specific to coal units, is that correct? Or is this for other types of units as well? If for example, North Omaha, when there's a fuel switch completed, will this equipment still be necessary?
Yes, it will. You still have to use water from the river system to cool. It's not necessarily coal. Any large steam unit that's on a body of water, would have the same need. Nuclear stations, for example, pretty common for them to need something like this also. But based upon our portfolio now, those are the 2 locations where we utilize river water. So Cass County, Sarpy County, those places we do not.
Great. Appreciate the clarification. I'm looking for and listening for questions, comments from other directors. I don't see hands. I see thumbs from Craig and Mary. So it sounds like we are in good shape. Again, as Troy opened with, this is approval to negotiate for this because of the specialty nature. Making sure everybody's on the same page there. Appreciate the technical description, and this is certainly an interesting type of equipment, Troy. So I'll look forward to additional updates in the future as this moves forward by January 1st, 2026.
Yeah, maybe you'd like a tour at some point in time after it's put in place also. It might be interesting to see. I'm looking forward to seeing that myself. So
yeah, anyone angry that you are basically cheating at fishing with this? It's no skill involved there. You're just scooping them right up.
Yeah, just remember I'm talking about fingerlings usually, so not usually something that's on the end of my fishing pole.
No prize fish in there. All right. Great. Well, again, thank you for the presentation here. And with that, I believe that is. Oh, I'm sorry, Troy. One additional item. Is that right? Or was that the end?
That's the end.
That is it.
Okay. It's all right. I'm looking at the agenda. Want to make sure I got everything down there. Yes. With that, I believe we have completed the Systems Committee agenda. So, Chair Bogner, back to you.
All right. Yeah, those long titles on the items are tricky. We're going to break for lunch now. Let's come back at 12:45, and we will continue at that time with public information. Thank you. So we'll get started again. Up next, we have the Public Information Committee report by Director Mulhoff, if she is back from lunch. There she is.
I am back, so thank you, Chair Bogner. Our committee did not meet. We have a regulatory and legislative update that Lisa's team will present, and then the North Omaha update. And so I'm going to turn it right over to Lisa and her team, and we'll talk about legislative and regulatory.
Great. Thank you, Director Mulhoff. Greatly appreciate it. And we'll start off with a state legislative update. January 4th is right around the corner, so lots of meetings have been taking place, and I'm going to pass it over to Tim O'Brien to give the latest, and then we will start our cadence next month with giving a recap of what's going on in the legislature as well as on the federal side of it. So, Mr. O'Brien.
Thanks, Lisa. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to provide an update to you. And we've got three topics today, as Lisa mentioned: state legislature, quick local update, and then a federal wrap up for the year. So on the state side, there's a lot of things changing and moving minute by minute, frankly. So new governor transition with Governor Jim Pillen taking office next year. On the first part of the slide, he is appointing his cabinet members. Many of them will remain the same from the Governor Ricketts administration. There will be a new chief of staff and policy and research director, for example, but many of the agencies that we work with very closely will have the same directors. So those things will continue to occur over the next few weeks as he assumes office. Then in November, there was quite a few election updates for the Nebraska legislature. There was 25 open seats. There were 12 seats that made up the area for which our service territory touches. All the incumbents did win their election, and there are 5 new members that we are continuing or just starting to get to know. So some definite changes there. And then also right before the legislature convenes, Speaker Hilgers will assume the role as Attorney General. And so the governor will then appoint a new senator for his district. So that will be another change just right before the session starts. So that's a quick summary of what's occurred since our last update and through the elections. Next slide, please. And in with the races, there's also leadership changes potentially on various committees. Most of our work is conducted within the Natural Resources Committee, and Senator Bruce Bosselman is who is the chair of that committee. There are likely a new speaker that will help set the agenda, and I'll talk about that next. And then telecommunications and transportation is another committee that we do a fair amount of work with, and there's several folks interested in sharing that particular committee, but wanted to give the board and the public a landscape of what the committee structure looks like at the moment for the Nebraska legislature. Next slide, please. Lisa mentioned this, our work really picks up on the 4th. This is the long session, so it's a 90-day session. A couple things that are I'll draw your attention to is bill introductions concludes on the 18th of January. So we will know a lot more on the 18th, and then we'll spend the next few days continuing to read all the bills. We do scan them all to see if there's any impacts to our district or just business matters that we have an interest in. So it is a heavy reading time for all of our team. There will be a variety of topics this year, especially with the new governor, several new senators. One of the big pieces that will continue is money. It is usually every legislative session, but forecasts remain high. And so there's a variety of senator ideas on where to expend those funds. So that will be a big theme throughout the whole session. And I'll speak just a little bit more in depth what that looks like for us. Next slide, please. And since the last legislative session convened, there continues to be hearings or legislative interim studies. And these are introduced by a senator or committee that has an interest in a particular topic. And so with the legislative resolution, doesn't that necessarily mean that there's action that can take place. There could be a study, there could be a hearing, there could be nothing done. And so here are some of the hearings that we've been watching, monitoring, or engaged in. Since our last report, there's a couple that I'll draw your attention to. LR 295, which has been a interest by several senators the last few years around pension funding. And I want to thank Seth Boyles and John Thurber for attending and representing the district and providing testimony. There was no questions of OPPD. The committee did state that we are headed in the right direction, so I wanted to carry that message. And then today, actually, starting here in about 45 minutes, is LR 401. This is a hearing on the Broadband Bridge Act. So this act deployed a significant amount of money to be distributed for broadband services. It also has some oversight within the Public Service Commission. So this is really a check-in on how that work is going and potential ways to further broadband deployment. The other hearing that, or interim resolution that many have asked about and has been of interest to us is LR 355, looking at Chapter 70 of the statutes for which we operate. There hasn't been any movement, or we believe there'll be no hearing or actually a report on LR 355. So that concludes my hearing update. If you want to go to the next slide, I'll shift back to looking forward. There's 3 topics on this slide. 2 of them we've talked about quite a bit the last 2 years, one on continued broadband and then critical workers. The last being weatherization. So we have 3 bills prepared and have senators that have agreed to introduce them for us. So we're excited about that. And so we're moving towards hopefully having success on these topics this year in the legislature. Next slide, please. Next steps, we're continuing new senator meetings or incumbent senator meetings. The Nebraska Power Association has a legislative subcommittee that Seth Boyles from our team is the chair of, and so they're continuing to work through their interests and strategy. There aren't really many major bills or proposals by our electric industry planned for the legislature. There will be a variety of topics, as we're hearing, that will come back from last year around a variety of things that don't have concrete yet, but I think will be a good year for a lot of education and work on the topics that I just mentioned for OPPD. And then we'll continue interim hearings. There are a couple of things wrapping up here, as I mentioned, just even this afternoon throughout the end of this month. So that concludes the state update. Next slide, I'm going to just speak to some of the things we're doing locally. I'm really proud. We added a person to our team. His name is Dustin Marvel. I share that, as you may see him in communities or city buildings, etc. We were able to bring him over from Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railway. He'll work very closely with Michaela. We've been busy supporting the organization on many topics, from North Omaha outreach to Power with Purpose. We continue work on solar regulations in Cass County and Otoe County, for example. We're hopeful that Cass County will have their updated regulations in early 2023. And then very, very busy with elections and are working on a whole onboarding process and facilitation for new elected officials at the local level. And so I'm excited to implement that work with the team early next year. So I apologize, I probably should have stopped at the legislative session. So I'll stop here before I jump into federal, see if there's any questions.
I don't see any hand raised. Anybody have questions on? Oh, okay. Craig, go ahead.
Yes. Sorry. Topic. Hot topic in Omaha is the streetcar issue. There was an interesting city council meeting that arose wherein one of our sister utilities talked about the potential impact to their ratepayers. And I think that I believe I saw a reference to that, or at least a conversation around OPPD as it pertains to that. So I was hoping that we could just offer some clarity for where we are, what our perspective is, what we know, what we don't know, if there's anything with respect to the impact on our ratepayers as a result of.
Yeah, thank you, Director Moody. And I'll give you my perspective, and then if there are any other technical answers, I have a team here that can help. The work associated with the streetcar, the utility work for OPPD associated with the streetcar is very preliminary, very, very preliminary. The city has some plans. We're starting to figure out exactly locations and all of that. And we will continue to work with city staff It is very important to remind the board and the public here that we do this type of work regularly. Now, it's not regularly that it's a streetcar, but this type of redevelopment work where you have a third party, in this case, it's a city, but it could be a private developer developing and doing work where we need to either augment our infrastructure or move and replace infrastructure as part of that project. There are regulations, there's a process that we go by that identifies the costs that we as a utility bear because they benefit the rest of our ratepayers, and we have an opportunity in some cases to expand our capability, to replace aging infrastructure that we would have had to replace anyway. And there are other costs that are borne by the developing entity, the costs that are truly benefiting that developing entity or are caused exclusively just by that developing entity. So we will continue to follow the process. From our perspective, we will work with the city. If we have to replace infrastructure that is part of our asset planning, we will do that, and we will end up with newer infrastructure that would have had to be replaced anyway. I do not expect this to result in any major shift in the work that we do on an annual basis. The work that is planned for the streetcar will take years. It will take a few years to complete. So it's not all in 1 year. So it's probably 2023, 24, 25. So we will continue to work and make sure that we include any work associated with that into our capital plan. But that's, from my perspective, it's a relatively normal type of work that we as a utility do. So hopefully that answers the question.
But it does. That's what I was looking for. Thank you, sir.
Okay, anything else? Tim, go ahead.
All right, thank you. Great questions. Federally, if you would go to the next slide. So there's just 2 slides to kind of close out the year on our work in DC. Seth Boyles from my team is literally in the air flying to DC right now. He's going to close out the year on seeing our delegation and some of the matters at hand there. So appreciate his work there. The focus between now and the end of the year is government funding, and the Defense Act are the two main focuses for Congress, and then they'll start up again next year. We had a really successful year of policy that impacted our utility business, our customers, stakeholders, etc. Public power was really, really strong in this, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday and even some last week. Specifically around the Inflation Reduction Act, we had hoped and worked. This has been years for some of the folks in the policy space or Treasury from our team, making sure that the playing field is level for public power with items like direct pay or others. And so great work by so many, including our trade organizations with the American APPA and the Large Public Power Council to help us with those endeavors. But really big deal, and some of the language on early drafts didn't have things level for entities such as ourselves. So just a banner year on that front. There is a lot of opportunities within the Inflation Reduction Act. You'll hear a little bit from Brad Underwood and Courtney Kennedy, I believe, to close out their updates on Power with Purpose, but certainly creates opportunities for our decision making for new renewables or things for our customers and potential tax benefits based on their decisions for their homes and businesses. So much more to come. The Treasury is rolling out a lot of the technical process, and so we have a lot of folks working on this, and actually just met with a big team at OPPD yesterday, including Lisa and CFO Bishop on the topic. So when we have more to report, we certainly will, but pleased with that. Also very focused on the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. We have a cross-functional team working at the opportunities that are rolling out over time, over the next couple of years, that will help our customers, our transition for the future, everything from grid modernization to advanced metering and other deployment of other technologies. So big team focusing on that. And also some of those funds will roll into state agencies. And so we will work with Nebraska state agencies to request funds or support them in their questions as they develop regulations or move those funds out. A couple other bills that I'll highlight. One is the CHIPS bill. This does a whole bunch of things, but it encourages silicon chips, computer chips, etc., to invest back in the United States with more research and grants and security items for the Department of Energy. So there are some grant funds around technology, telecommunications, as we think about two-way communication. So a lot in that one that we're continuing to watch as it being implemented. It was passed around the July timeframe. Then there was several, kind of a package of 3 bills that occurred on cybersecurity. This was around the March timeframe, if my memory serves me correct. Some of this was around reporting for critical infrastructure if there was a data leak or a hack or something to that nature. So that was a pretty big package that moved through. A lot of bills this year. I put the total because it does move a little bit, about 15,000. This was similar to the year prior and even prior to that. But if you go about 5 or 6 years back, about 10 to 12,000 was the number. And depending on how you look at what's enacted, it can be anywhere from 1% to 4% from that number, just to give a perspective on the number of bills and how they get folded into some of the larger packages that I just mentioned. Next slide, a little bit on elections.
Tim, Rick has a question.
Yes.
I can wait to the end.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize I raised my hand. But as long as we're here. So back to the IRA and the many things that are in there. I'm very happy that OPPD is looking for opportunities in the IRA and that would come directly to OPPD and that would come through state or federal agencies. My understanding is there are some opportunities for private entities, be they businesses or individuals. What's OPPD's role in helping them, or is there a role there? Especially thinking about residential.
Appreciate that comment. As I said, we have a cross-representative team that is working right now on all of those opportunities. So we're going to take care of internally at this moment, but then look for the outside of how we can help our customers. So more to come on that. So we haven't completely scoped that out yet, Director Yoder.
I think to your point, Director, I think it's a great opportunity. It's a lot to take. It's not just the Inflation Reduction Act. And another very, very significant act from a grants perspective is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the IIJA, which was approved a few months earlier. So our staff, our team members are focused on trying to maximize the benefit grants applications that we're submitting for the greatest benefit of the district. And that includes at some point benefits that we can pass on to customer owners directly. That one, to be honest with you, that hasn't been the main focus for us right now. It's making sure that we can take advantage and maximize the value as we are deploying very large projects, power with purpose type of projects. Heather Siepkin's team on our product development and marketing team, they would be the ones who are, and this is not new for them. They've been doing this type of work in the past with other acts and other grants, where we find opportunities to share information. If we can't access those funds directly, we can pass information to customer owners, whether it's electric vehicle chargers, electric vehicles themselves, or customer-owned solar, batteries, etc. So there will be work done there, but I don't have a report today other than to say we will get there. We are focused mainly on extracting the largest value we can on the largest projects we have in the short horizon.
And Heather
for
and
the
her
response.
team are on that.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Heather and her team are on the core team internally as well.
Thank you for the response. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate the question. On the election front, there was a couple items I wanted to highlight, just how it impacts our representatives. So from the House of Representatives, Mike Flood won his election to represent District 1. Don Bacon won his re-election. Both are 2-year terms. And then speculation on appointment of a new senator with Ben Sass assuming a new role that would occur in early January. And then the Georgia runoff that took place last week does move the Senate majority to the Democratic side. The Republican side has a majority on the House. So definitely a little bit of a split structure, but want to just provide that update. We'll learn a lot more when new senators and House of Representatives get seated and we make it through, hopefully, Government Funding and Defense Act the rest of the year. That concludes my prepared remarks. Thank you very much.
Eric, did you have a question or just? Okay. All right. Thanks, Tim, for that update. Do you have more that you are going to present, or you?
That's it for right now, and I'm going to be presenting the North Omaha outreach.
Okay, and before we do that, I think that Chair Bogner has a statement about the North Omaha outreach.
Yeah, thank you, Director Mulhoff. So before we hear the monthly North Omaha Station Outreach Report, I would like to comment on the approved resolution and OPPD's work around the community engagement requested by the board. In August, the board voted on and approved a resolution to extend operations at North Omaha Station. This decision was not made in a silo. OPPD and the board have been transparent around area growth, the need for critical generating assets and reliability, as well as the challenges with interconnection, supply chain, and construction. These are highly technical and complicated topics, and they're sometimes difficult to convey to the general public. But the decision to extend operations was not made lightly, and the decision has been made. North Omaha Station will continue to run until the construction of Standing Bear Lake and Turtle Creek stations are complete, and we have received and completed the required steps from the Southwest Power Pool for their final and irrevocable interconnection. This does not change our long-term focus or our commitment to being net zero carbon by 2050. Since the vote in August, the OPPD team has taken a thoughtful approach to deliver on our request for community engagement. They've reached out to the board to understand what success looks like for each of us, and that includes who in the community should be reached out to and what types of events might be most impactful. They've met with elected officials, community leaders, the chamber, and community organizations, as well as public health organizations. They've engaged our employees who live in the area adjacent to North Omaha Station for feedback and insight. And since September, the team has publicly reported on their progress in this all-committee meeting and will continue to do so in future months. Their focus has been on North Omaha in order to gain a better understanding of community needs and the benefits related to North Omaha Station operation. This work is ongoing and not yet complete, and each conversation has had a ripple effect, with the team asking who else they should speak with, leading to more conversations and more insights. The team has met some great people along the way, and we appreciate the stakeholders who are helping guide us toward those broader conversations. For those that have not joined the conversation yet, please visit OPPD.com and OPPDCommunityConnect.com to learn more about how to participate in the conversation. We appreciate constructive and respectful conversations and collaborations. That's what's going to help make this work. Success may look different to some. Others may have their own agenda and expectations of what should be happening or think things should be happening faster. I respectfully ask the public to positively engage with our team in a constructive manner. Let's not distract the OPPD team from the task at hand. Let's align on outcomes, support them where we can, and work together to make a positive impact. Our OPPD team is comprised of dedicated, passionate, and professional individuals who are committed to carrying out the board's request and fulfilling our mission to provide reliable, affordable, and environmentally sensitive energy services to our customer owners. With that said, We've received public criticism, and there are opportunities for improvement. Lisa, I'll turn it over to you now so you can share with the team what the team has accomplished this month and what actions will be taken to course correct.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Chair Bogner. And I know the team greatly appreciates that. They've been working hard and nights and weekends as well. So those comments will go a long way with them. So as you've heard me say, community outreach and our engagement we're constantly learning and checking and adjusting along the way. And we've done that with all of our outreach. Decarbonization added more meetings where we felt like that we needed some more clarity. And this outreach is no different. We're still on a listening tour to find out what's on people's minds. And the resolution, which you'll see on the next slide, please, Christy, was very broad, right? And talking about, but yet focused on educational, public health, and community-led organizations, and engaging in leaders in the organizations, which we have done that thoughtfully. And at the conclusion of every single meeting, we have said, who else should we be meeting with? Because we want to come to you rather than you having to come to us. So just appreciate the glide path that we've had, but we will continue to adjust on this and learn from our outreach efforts. Always more to be done. Next slide, please. You've seen this each month. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I want to spend time on the slide that's coming up about what's next. If you could go to that slide, please. So since our last meeting, this is just a high level of some of the outreach that we have been doing. NOAA, which has been a great organization, which is the North Omaha Area Health, they've been a great partner with us, as well as Sparks, which is community development. And the Empowerment Network has been phenomenal. In fact, we were set to be presenting in front of a few hundred people on Saturday, but they asked us to move that to January because they wanted to focus on the unfortunate violence that has been happening in the community. And so they asked us if we could move to January. And we said, absolutely, because we want to be as engaged. And we'll have a table there talking to people and also talking about their bills and ways that they can reduce their bills. So this has been more of just, it's been an outreach, but it's been listening and then finding out what's on people's minds. Another great partner has been the Douglas County Health Department. The team has been engaging deeply with them, and they're a great resource for us as well as LB 1024. And then we did just conclude a tour just this last week, and the weather started getting a little rough there. So we wanted to make sure that we had a few cancellations due to the weather, but we are planning on having another tour of the plant. Next slide, please. So what's next? We're still in that listening mode. So I'll start with the December part of it. We continue to engage the public health and data collection of what's on people's mind, what type of health issues are in the community. And then we're going to continue to do another tour, one or two of those, and then we're going to have a public meeting as well in January. As you heard me say before, we're going to have the State of the Utility tomorrow, that all public members from 4 o'clock on, that all public members can be part of WebEx. We felt like with decarbonization, we could give an update on that. Power with Purpose, we'll be talking about the funding that's going to be available, because we know that we've heard that, especially in the community, of what can we do to help as well. And then be a catalyst with those funds as well. The next in January, we'll be doing an all public meeting that will be in the North Omaha community. We have not determined on the location yet, but more to come on that. And then our continued outreach. This is where that we started with larger associations, but now we're going to get more targeted for around the plant. We heard that loud and clear, so we are listening in that regard. And then the churches, we had started with some of the larger churches, like we were at Salem Baptist Church, but we're going to go with the churches that are around the area and get to meet with them. And then what we're going to do is bucket what we heard. bring that back to executive leadership team and then the board and the public to say, here are the buckets of information that we heard during this. And then determine in a short-term and long-term action plans that would be in the best interest of the community. So we are not done. We will continue to do our outreach, and we hope that the community will come along in a respectful manner with us, because we're here to serve. We're all public servants, and we feel really strongly about that. So that's the end of my report at this time, and I'll gladly answer any questions.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you for your team for all the effort that you've put into this, and for your response to the community that with the comments that we've recently received. So
we do take those to heart. So but we're doing our best, and we will continue to learn and grow in this outreach effort.
Okay. Director Spurgeon.
Thank you, Director Mulhoff. And thank you, President Wagner, for your opening statement. I think that's a wonderful clarification of the state of current reality. I don't have a question, but I have some, I think I have about 5 comments here. First one, I appreciate the methodical and measured approach that you're employing to carry this out, Vice President Olson. You could have taken a slapdash approach and picked 10 people to interview and called it good. Instead, you are working your way through quite a long list. You have indicated that you are asking people that you are hearing from, as was mentioned in the opening statement by President Wagner, that you are saying, who else should we meet with? That is such an effective practice, and it contributes to a really such a deeper and broader understanding of the community's views and perspectives. So that's just terrific. Not everyone who was invited to take the last tour of North Omaha Station accepted, and weather was a reason. People are busy. It's a terribly busy time of year, and there's illness going around on that. So please don't take that personally, that people weren't there, that all the people that you had invited. But I think the people who were meant to be on that tour were on that tour. And there is nothing wrong with having small class sizes. People in the class feel respected and cared for, and all the questions get to be answered. So I think that's terrific. And just to mention, there was concern that neighborhood associations hadn't been added to the list. And I know I gave you 2 names at least, and I gave you a contact for one of the churches in that area there. So it's great that more institutions are saying, come and listen to us. So that's just terrific. So just in closing, thank you to everybody in public affairs who's doing all this work. I find it, well, I find it difficult. I mean, you have to have the other person answer the phone, and then they have to get the date that works for everybody, and all that. And it's always so interesting when you actually get to the meeting, but it's hard doing all the preliminary work. So thank you to all your team who are doing it.
Thank you so much, Director Spurgeon, for those kind words.
I'm seeing no other hands raised. So, Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Director Mulhoff. Y'all are doing a ton of work. There's a lot of work happening, and ever since I've joined this board, public engagement, public transparency has been something that we've talked about time and time again. So I don't think it's any secret that this board, and I'll say I in particular, am very interested in making sure that we take advantage of the fact that we're a public power district, and really lean into that. And it is time consuming. But it's really important work, and I want to make sure that we continue to do it. And I acknowledge and see the work that you're doing. If I could offer one thought for what this looks like as we go forward, I'll simply say this. I perceive that when people that right now there's a perception in the community that they don't fully understand the process that we're going through. They don't understand all of the things that you've presented in previous board meetings and including the information that's here. They want, I think they need to better understand the full breadth of what we're doing, the different phases, how it's starting big and drilling down. Like all of that is really important information. And my perception is, and even when I hop into OPPD Community Connect right now, that's not there. There's a lot of really good information about the decision that was made and what's happening at North Omaha Station. But if we could lay out the process for them so that they can understand, okay, it's not time for me yet. My time is in January. I see that we've got a big, outreach effort that's there. That to me is when they don't hear anything from us, they perceive that they're being skipped over. And so that would be my recommendation, is to more broadly share the process that we're going through, so that people can better understand when the right time is to plug in and see how they can have their voice heard.
Great input, greatly appreciate it. And we're in communication, so we need to do a better job of communicating what we're communicating about. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, this is a complicated issue and situation for me as the director who represents people in North Omaha, particularly people who have expressed feelings about both the decision that was made by the board and the engagement that has follows and will continue to follow. I also appreciate all the work that staff has done. I appreciate the outline of the process that we have seen. And I appreciate where we are anticipating heading with a public meeting in January and then outcomes from the input that we receive. I will say on a Tuesday afternoon at 1:30 today, looking through the attendee list, I see several people who I know are specifically interested in the engagement around North Omaha Station. But I think broadly, presentations during the committee meeting and the board meeting on a whole of utility type of scale don't always make it to people who need to hear the message about what the intended community engagement is. And so I'm glad to hear that we will continue that outreach. I know that we have presented materials here, that we have things on Community Connect, but from here forward, I plan to share a link to the slides that are presented today and a link to the recording of this meeting with people who I know are interested to make sure that out of all of the information that is presented today, including the corporate operating plan and all of the other discussions, there is a small piece that has massively disproportionate interest to a group of people who are personally directly impacted. And I think that is a method of communication that is challenging to accomplish. And I'm glad to hear that we are going to continue the outreach to make sure that people are hearing the message that we are sharing. Making it available is one thing, but communication requires confirmation that it has been received and then understanding how it was received by the people that it was intended to get to. And so from here forward, I do see the outline that is on the screen right now, and I hear where we are headed. Yes, I understand concerns from the community about their perception of the engagement, whether that is right or wrong. As Craig said, it is still their perception, and that is really what is important in the way that we understand our communication. During the discussion about the approval of the extension, I indicated that it's important that we continue the communication with community members who are directly impacted, not until we feel that we have achieved the outcome, but until they feel that their voices have been heard and that we have achieved the communication outcomes that were desired. And that is still my position today. And, my vote to approve the extension at North Omaha, I got to say, was very largely contingent on the additional language included in the resolution about the public engagement to make sure that we are hearing from people who are directly impacted. And so I take the resolution language that was displayed and the commitment to the engagement and the understanding and working to reduce the impacts very seriously. And at this point, people are emailing me and calling me. Someone stopped me in my local coffee shop the other day to ask what's going on. I know that we are doing outreach. I know we have had a lot of meetings and some people have been involved, and there are more people who also need to be involved looking forward. And so, again, I appreciate the outline of the next steps. I personally am going to be continuing to share the information that's available on our website, available in the video recordings with people who I know are interested. And I want to make sure that people understand the desired communication that we are attempting to achieve, so that at the end I can say, as the person who represents you, I want you to know that your feelings, your thoughts are valid and are heard and are part of the decision-making process about how we will continue forward. It was mentioned earlier, we have already had a resolution and a board action and a decision on the extension of operations at North Omaha Station. And I think it's important that we clarify, we do not intend to revisit that decision because of reasons that are outside of the control of OPPD, based on interconnection through SPP for new resources. But there are other decisions and other actions and other methods of engagement that we might be able to implement. And I look forward to seeing how the community engagement that we carry out will help us understand which of those actions are best suited to the needs that are expressed by the community members who want to be part of this process. So again, thank you for the work that has been done so far. I appreciate the presentation and the outline of the next steps, and I'm looking forward to continued engagement with as many people as would like to be involved in this process. Thanks.
If I may, Director Williams, and just to confirm, my commitment as president and CEO of the organization is to follow the resolution. We made a commitment to reach out, to listen, and that's exactly what we're gonna do. And I really appreciate what you're saying. It's not the satisfaction here is that we've listened. We may not be able, and we will not be able to implement all of the ideas that people have. And I want to set that very clear. But I think it's important for us to listen and to find ways for us to continue to improve our community. What was incredibly important about the resolution that was approved in August is that I am responsible, just like every board member here is responsible, personally, to maintain and provide reliable power to 850,000 people in our service territory. And I want to make sure, I want to remind people that that's what that resolution is doing. We proposed the temporary delay of the conversion of the North Omaha Station because reliability and resilience of our system is so important for 850,000 people. And so I want to remind the public that is what was at stake. We will continue to meet our commitments on the resolution, and we will have good opportunities to engage. I think, as Craig mentioned earlier, we have been having lots of meetings. If we haven't met with you yet, and you want to meet with us, and you want to have your voice heard, you can do that through OPPD Community Connect, or we will have larger meetings that are open to the public where we will have those types of discussions. But I want to remind everyone, and I think this is important for the OPPD team, we live and die to keep the power onto our communities. There are 850,000 souls who depend on the power that we provide. And we are trying to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions, and we've done a fantastic work so far. And there's more to be done. And there's more community engagement to be done. We will continue to do that. Our employees are dedicated. They will be there. They will listen. I want to remind the public that our employees are moms and dads. They are people with feelings too, and they are in here to listen and to try to do the best work that we can. Right? We're not the bad people here. We're here to work with the community and reach understanding and listen to each other. So I appreciate Chair Bogner your statement, and we'll looking forward to more engagements in the future.
Thanks everyone for your input on that. And Lisa, thanks again to your team for listening and reaching out. And, you know, the difficult thing about communication is there's always people who aren't going to get the message because they're not connected into a certain platform or a certain news outlet to, you know, whatever way that we've chosen to communicate. So that's the challenge. And so for people who are just finding out about this, we've tried and made our best effort. So Rick, go ahead. You have a comment.
Yeah. So Lisa and your team, I know you're working hard. And I think people who are making constructive criticisms on how to improve the process, my experience over the years has been that you welcome those and that you respond to those.
Absolutely.
So I think you just can't do everything all at once. I think there's work to be done yet, and you've said that you're going to be doing it, so that's good. Here's a couple of things that occurred to me as I heard everyone speak. One, the resolution language, if we can go back to that, has as the objective for your work. There you go. It twice uses the verb engage, right? And so I'm wondering if the engagement that we visualize here with the community is the same as the engagement that we visualized under SD8 when we're working with our employees. Do we have the same expectations for outcomes? Because I did hear somebody say that our chore is to listen to the community. And I really think there's a difference between listening and engagement. So I would just make that observation. And then the second observation that I would make is that we got stuck between a rock and a hard place, and we made the decision we had to make in North Omaha. And I do think that our mission needs to be represented when we talk about North Omaha. And we have a three-legged mission. One is environmental sensitivity. And so environmental sensitivity is not just carbon. So I just think in our language, as we talk about this, we do have to recognize our mission is a three-legged stool. So those are my two observations after having heard folks. And again, you're doing a lot of work, you're doing hard work. And I respect the team that's doing it. They're in every public position, whether it's a health department, whether it's an environmental regulatory agency, these are my experiences. You end up in times when the public is not going to be happy with it. And so I recognize that there are professionals doing good work, and please keep doing that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Director Yoder. You've always heard me say success of stakeholder is that people may not like the outcome, but they understand why. And that was part of this journey and is part of this journey along the way. And Chair Bogner, the comment that you made that we're meeting great people along this journey, that has been probably the best part of all of this, because we're building even more relationships than we had before. So I want to thank the board for that as well. Back to you.
Okay, if there's no other comments, then I will turn it back to Chair Bogner, and we'll move on with the agenda. That concludes PI report. Thank you.
Okay, great. The next item on our agenda is confirmation of the board meeting agenda. So if you guys could look at that and let me know if there's anything that you would like to pull off of the consent action items to move into board discussion items. Let's do that now. I think the COP resolution is an obvious one to move into board discussion.
Yep.
Any other items? Okay, hearing none, we will be moving item 8.23 final corporate operating plan resolution 6540 into the discussion action item list. And next on our agenda is review of board work plan. And sorry, okay, so yes. Maybe go to is there another slide there?
We do appear to not have a copy of the board work plan after here. I know at this stage there weren't any new additional items added. I do think there was clarity provided on one item.
Right, and when you guys can you please add an accepted date to that SD12 item that is now listed as not started?
Yes, we will do that.
Okay. I did not hear any items that bubbled up in committee that should be placed on a parking lot at this time, and I haven't received any other information from committee chairs, so I am assuming we can move forward, that there's nothing new to add to this at the moment. Okay, moving along. Next item here is OPPD Master Facilities Plan. I will be turning that over to Mr. Kevin McCormick.
Thank you. I just wanted to give an overview today of the Master Facility Assessment and Plan. And before I do that, I just want to give a shout out to Vice President Brown, who actually started this activity before I took over. She got it rolling, so thank you. Next slide, please. Really, the purpose of this assessment and plan is to provide a robust framework for the development of a 30-year facility vision. It's also to provide facilities that will support OPPD's efforts for both current and future needs. And by doing this, utilize cross-functional teams, including HDR, to provide needed information and perspectives. The plan is made up of 3 phases. The first phase is assessment and collecting data. Second phase is interviews and surveys. And we've been working both of those parallel. And then the third phase is to take all that information and develop the plan. Where we currently are is we've done assessments on 22 non-generation facilities at OPPD. What that's looking at is life-saving and code compliance, accessibilities, the structures themselves, plumbing, HVAC, and fire protection, just to name a few. So where we're currently at is also we've hired a program manager for the master facility plan, and we're collecting data from the OPPD huddle space. Every day we get new information on that, as where our employees like to work, collaborate from, how many people still like working from home versus coming into a collaboration space, and so on. And so that'll help give us input into this whole plan. If you can turn to the next slide. Really, our next steps are implementing the plan by identifying new construction, renovation, or maintenance plans for each of the facility for operational effectiveness and efficiencies. We'll develop written long-term strategic plans using assessments to this process, along with creating preventive maintenance and asset management programs. We're also working with utility ops to do a holistic assessment of all our service centers. You know, as our service territory grows and we're shifting around, do we have them in the right locations, and are they the right size, and are they accomplishing everything we need them to do? And then the last thing we'll be doing is aligning with the finance, generation, and substations to make sure that we're making fiscal coordination of projects. We know there's a lot to do, and we're doing a lot as a company. We just got to make sure it all lines up, not to put an added burden on our customers. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions today.
Go ahead, Director Moody.
Thanks, Kevin. Could you just kind of summarize at a high level what the timing is on the plan? How I mean, what percentage complete is it? When do we expect the full plan to be complete?
So we're finishing up on phase 1 and 2. We're getting into phase 3, the writing of it. By the end of the year, we'll have the plan written. But we're doing things, if things are needed, we're doing them today. We're moving them forward. But what we're really, by the end of 2023, there will be a plan in place. And I don't want to assume that we don't have a plan for facilities. Every day we come into work and we fix things, we improve things. But this, what sets this apart from that current work is this is a strategic looking way out 30 years to make sure that we're covering these facilities.
Yeah, yeah, thank you for that clarity. If I could, let me repeat back just to make sure that I'm understanding. You said by the end of the year, so by the end of 2023,
yeah.
Which would also include the service centers that are referenced in the process bullet B. So it's by that point, we're getting to a pretty near all-encompassing facility assessment to exclude the generating facilities. Yes?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay. And then from there, just from a board's perspective, this is line of sight, right? There's no action necessarily that you need from us, but perhaps there would be budget implications in years there forward. So that's really where probably it's most instructive for the board to have a good understanding for what investments are going to be necessary. Am I getting that right?
That is correct.
Okay.
And as we get this moving closer, I'll provide more updates to the board as we move down this path.
Okay. I'm good. Thank you, Kevin.
Any other questions, board? All right, Mr. McCormick, thanks for your information today. We look forward to other future updates. Next up on the agenda is our Power with Purpose solar, natural gas, and transmission update. I see Megan just popped on. Am I passing it to you, or would Brad Underwood or Troy Vi like to make some opening comments?
Brad or Troy, is anything you want to say? Sorry.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't.
Go ahead, Brad.
Go ahead. No, please, Troy.
No, I was just going to say this work continues to move along readily. The team will provide a nice update today, but just like with our discussion with Fort Calhoun, a lot of effort behind the scenes. These are huge, massive projects, and we haven't built this much, especially in the generation standpoint, for many years. So a good muscle that we are now exercising and getting better at, and been pretty impressed with the way the team has approached this thus far. And that's all I really have, Brad. I don't know if you had anything else to add to it or not.
No, thank you. Nothing more to add.
All right, we can go ahead and get started. You want to go to the next slide, please? All right, today we'll provide you kind of a year in reflection of 2022 for our Standing Bear Lake and Turtle Creek Station projects. And then Mr. McCormick will come back and give a safety overview of those projects. And then we'll also have a solar update. Next slide. All right, we'll start off with Standing Bear Lake Station. We thought it'd be kind of cool to kind of go back and review the project and how it's progressed through 2022. First up, we have some site photos, side-by-side comparison. On the left-hand side is the site back in May. This is kind of if you're on Military Road facing south. And you'll see that was when we were in our preliminary grading, and that was close to wrapping up. And then on the right-hand side, about 6 months later, you can see how the efforts have changed into construction activities, and those are well in progress and making good evolutions and good progress here to date. So just kind of a good side-by-side comparison of where we come from beginning of the year and where we're kind of ending up 2022. Next slide, please. One of the major milestones that we met for the Standing Bear Lake Station site was our move of our major equipment from Wartzilla, our RICE or reciprocating internal combustion engines, were safely and successfully transported to our site. If you recall, they were shipped from Italy back in July and then came by rail to our local area. We had significant coordination with the equipment vendor, the EPC vendor or engineer procure construct vendor, as well as a lot of our local authorities that support these heavy haul moves. I do want to give kudos to a lot of our employees with OPPD. We had coordination and logistics through our Elkhorn Service Center. We had significant support from our outreach and media teams. And then also our line crew did support the lifting of many power leads or power lines in support of these delivery to the site. And you'll recall that this was, we have 9 of these, so this was done 9 times and done successfully. So quite a feat and something that the project team is very proud of. Next slide, please. Here we got a variety of pictures, kind of a up close of some different work activities that are going on at the Standing Bear Lake site. And really just kind of to show that there's a magnitude of coordination, the amount of material, and different activities that are happening at the site, just to kind of put in perspective what's going on when we're talking about the construction at the site itself. You'll see we've got an engine assembly going on with our Wartzilla tent up in the left-hand corner. We've got some duct banks being installed, various system piping, as well as electrical conduit and manholes that are kind of pointed out on the slide. And then next slide, please. We thought it'd be kind of interesting to look at some statistics of the project in 2022. This particular project is approximately 40% complete. Our operational readiness date remains January of 2024. I won't go into all the specifics or stats on the slide, but kind of some things to note. At any given time, we currently have about 170 people head count at the construction site. That does fluctuate depending on the activities that are in progress. We've also called out the different amount of work hours conducted by Zachary, who's our engineer procure construct vendor. And then from the OPPD hours, that's consists of not only our OPPD project team, but our internal subject matter experts, our owner engineer HDR, as well as other departments such as construction and maintenance. Kind of a fun fact, if you look at the foundation concrete, the underground conduit that's pointed out here, it's about approximately 45,000 linear feet. And just kind of to give comparison, that'd be about 8.5 miles to kind of put things in perspective. So really pleased with where Standing Bear Lake has progressed this year, and definitely look forward to having success in 2023 as well. I'll move on to Turtle Creek, and then when I conclude, I'll answer any questions that you guys might have. Next slide, please. Similarly, at Turtle Creek, we thought it'd be interesting to see how the site has progressed through 2022. On the left-hand side, this is the site, if you're standing off Fairview Road looking south. This is when we were finalizing up preliminary grading. And then on the right-hand side, we've got that same picture or perspective, but with construction well underway at the site. Next slide. Again, another major milestone here at Turtle Creek deals with the movement or heavy haul of our major equipment from Siemens Energy, including our gas turbine and generator to the site. We are finishing up some additional moves for our Unit 2, and those should be complete very near term. But these again require significant support from local entities, the project team, Siemens, their heavy hauler, and our Zachary, and well as coordination and support from our line crew that help with line lifts as needed. So it takes a lot of people to make these moves happen successfully and safely, and very appreciative of the support there. Next slide. Here's some close-up snapshots of different work activities occurring at Turtle Creek Station. Really just kind of want to call out some of the different things that are going on here. In some cases, it's pretty straightforward. In other cases, there's a lot of precision work and activities going on there. And it's kind of just impressive to see the amount of things that once construction gets started, how quickly things and efficiently things can get done and progress can be made. Next slide. Again, we've captured some statistics for the Turtle Creek Station. This is also 40% complete to date, and we still have an operational readiness date of January of 2024. Some things to note here, currently there are approximately 190 people at Turtle Creek Station. Again, that will fluctuate depending on which activities are occurring at the site. We have called out the year-to-date work hours by both Zachary, our engineer procure construct, as well as the OPPD team. Again, that includes our owner engineer, HDR, our project team, and various subject matter experts. Here, kind of a fun fact, or comparison to give, the foundation concrete, you'll see there is about 2,200 cubic yards, which is equivalent to about 445,000 gallons. So a lot of things, a lot of material is being installed, a lot of equipment is being handled, and a lot of coordination is occurring at these sites. So really just kind of wanted to share a year in perspective for both projects. We're making good progress. We've got ways to go in 2023, but looking forward to doing that successfully and getting these units close to operational in January of 2024. I will pause to see if there's any questions that you have for myself.
I don't see any hands. Just double check here. Any questions?
Okay.
Megan, I just want to express, you guys also continue to execute. This is also a very, very complicated construction process, like our deconstruction process at Fort Calhoun, and you guys are executing extremely well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair Bogner. I appreciate that. I think Courtney is up next.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Good afternoon. If we can go to the next slide. I have a couple of slides to update, first off on Platteview Solar, and then we'll get into some of the other dynamics around solar. So Platteview is making progress. Major equipment has been ordered, and the design packages are continuing to move forward. So as we prepare for 2023, construction should begin commencing here in the next couple of months. But we also have work going on at the substation. This is OPPD substation where the solar facility will interconnect in Saunders County. So starting to see a little bit more activity on site, which is exciting, and definitely look forward to bringing more photos like Megan has. A couple other things of note, there's a lot of coordination with various teams at OPPD, with AES, and with the EPC partner out in the community, just to make sure that the community is tracking along with progress and getting ready for that. And then also having touch points around other economic development opportunities locally. So trying to connect local labor, local construction, things like that. So lots going on, and we're gearing up for construction here very soon. Next slide, please. I won't spend a lot of time here, but as you all know, and as Tim O'Brien did a nice job covering, the Inflation Reduction Act is a big piece for how we keep deploying solar. So there was some more progress or announcements made in November around some of the requirements, but there's still guidance that we're looking for within the details here. And so we continue to work very closely with other groups, internal and external, monitoring that progress so that we can incorporate in our deployment plans for solar. So more to come, hopefully, as we see the IRS and the Treasury firm those things up. We go to the next slide. I'll spend a bit more time here. So anti-circumvention. I think we brought this to the board back in March and started this conversation. This has been a big disruption to solar across the U.S. for the past many months. And that's when the investigation began back in March. We were expecting to have some clarity in the August timeframe, but that was delayed. And so finally, just about a week and a half ago, the Department of Commerce issued its initial ruling. So there's a bit to unpack here, and admittedly, we're still trying to understand it. But what that ruling called out is that there were so many companies that participated and responded and provided their documentation, and then there were companies that did not respond. And so of the companies that responded, 3 of those were Chinese companies, 1 South Korean, were found compliant with the U.S. tariffs. So they were found to not be circumventing those tariffs. And you can see the list there of those 4. Of the responding companies, there were 4 that were found to have circumvented the tariffs. And so those are also listed. I will note in both of these groups, these are very common solar panel providers. Many of them are on our approved equipment list and are sought after across the country. And so there's a lot to kind of react to around what that means for the supply chain across solar. The tariffs that could be applied can be anywhere from the 16 to 20% all the way to the 250%. So if you think about project economics on some of these large projects, that's a big deal. So that's what we're kind of learning right now. The final results will come out in May of 2023. So really kind of an interesting snapshot. What does this mean for Power with Purpose? So again, there's a lot to review and understand, but you know, from what we're seeing, we have discussions with developers and suppliers. We'll be able to start to pinpoint a little bit more of the impact for new sourcing of solar. What does that do to timing and pricing? The really good news is that the panels for Platteview Solar are not impacted by this investigation. So we are continuing to move forward as we plan to on that project. So I anticipate more updates next year, but just kind of an interesting advancement here right at the end of the year. Looks like we have a hand, Director Moody.
Yeah, thank you. Just curious, any gut check on the likelihood that there will be any meaningful material difference between their preliminary findings and what the final findings will be in May 23? I know that that's perhaps just who knows, but I'm just curious about confidence levels around that.
Yeah, I think at this point it's hard for confidence levels, at least from what I've reviewed. I will say that these companies now have the opportunity to come back and say, here's what we did right, you know, and sort of challenge that. And so I think we could still see some things move. You know, the other piece of this is there were 20 companies that did not respond, and so they have to work through what that means. So I think we may see more come out. You also have the President Biden issued that 2-year tariff exemption. It's there on the slide. And so for those companies that are found non-compliant, there still is that 2-year buffer for some of those projects to move forward. It's really what happens after that time. So a few different dynamics at play here.
Great. And so thank you for that. And follow up, I'm counting 28 companies, I think, if my math is correct. That's simple math that I think I can do. Can you give me a sense for what percentage of the total market share that represents? Is that the vast majority of solar, if not all, or not non-US based, or help me understand there?
Yeah, so when this initially came out, it was about 80% of the panels coming to the US. So a lot of those from China or Southeast Asia. With the IRA, you're starting to see some of the companies on this page and others really ramp up or start to make plans for domestic production here in the US. But as we all know, that takes several years to see that move.
Hey, Courtney, I think you and Director Moody are hitting on some great points, and I want to kind of take a moment here and talk about the last couple of quarters. And so what we had happen the last couple of quarters is we had teams working really hard to navigate this, but people couldn't see it. What they saw was our solar sourcing kind of not advancing. I don't want to put words in people's mouths, but that's kind of what a lot of them told us. And so I would just like to point out, a lot of times we talk about cost in these sort of settings. Is it cost competitive, the economics of things, and we should. But we don't really talk about legal issues and risk issues related to projects, and those are substantial. So to Director Moody's point, over the last couple of quarters, you've had this cloud over 80% of the panels in the world. And you've had this significant commercial uncertainty as to the cost of a bulk majority of the project, which is the panels. And if you look at some of these providers down here in the bottom, Trina Solar, 254% tariff. Same thing for Vina. I don't know phonetically if I'm saying that correctly. And I would just say even a 25% tariff, a 20% tariff, a 15% tariff, monumental swings in prices and the project risk associated with whether or not you were going to get identified this was extraordinary. And I just want to make that come alive a little bit because the way the team advanced through the plat view discussions to eliminate this risk and allow that work to continue was incredible. None of you saw it. And so I just want to recognize the difficulty of that. And I want people to understand, and ultimately I want people to trust us. When you don't hear anything from us, many times we are at work, very much so. And we are at work trying to harvest an outcome for our community that everybody can be comfortable with. And I think this is a really good example. And so, Courtney, I appreciate you, your patience and waiting for the Department of Commerce to act in the way that the administration wanted them to act and for bringing that to life here. But ultimately, I just wanted to thank you and make sure people really connected the dots between how big a deal this was and what an obstacle it's been for us.
Can I hop in? Brad, I think that's really well said. You know, the day-to-day work that occurs, you know, we're certainly, we as director, well, I shouldn't speak for us. I'll speak for myself. You know, we have an opportunity to plug in every so often, but the depth and breadth and complexity of the work is not something that I'm able to wrap my head around and certainly recall in some instances. Which is why, you know, perhaps the questions that I'm asking are fairly basic, but some of this is about getting back up to speed. I fully appreciate and perhaps have a better understanding for the work that's involved on a day-to-day basis that we don't see. So thank you for that reminder. I think that's really important, certainly for us as directors, but also for the community, because I think you're right. I do think that, you know, you don't hear anything, you just assume nothing's going on, and that's not true. So thank you for pointing that out. If I could ask a follow-up question, you described that cloud that was hanging over this 80%. Is it fair to say that perhaps the clouds maybe haven't lifted entirely, but there's a little bit more clarity for what this looks like going forward, but still we won't have definitive clarity until May 23, right? So still 80% of the market could be construed as somewhat in flux until we've got that full clarity?
I think there's rays of sunshine kind of punching through that cloud a little bit, but Miss Kennedy's a lot brighter than I am on it, so I'll ask for her voice here.
Yeah, I think that's a great visual, Brad. You know, we've been operating under assumptions that we just don't know what's going to happen, and now you have names out there, and it's more information than we've had since about March. So I think there's more to come, to your point, but you know, as we start to have conversations on other projects with developers, et cetera, you know, now we kind of understand where their supply may be impacted or not impacted, and start to maybe true up some of the pricing and the CODs as we move forward. CODs to be commercial operation dates. All right, if we can go to the last slide, you know, I think December is kind of always the time to reflect on the last year, and true to the last conversation, this has been a bit of a dynamic year in solar, among many other areas of our company. But there is starting to be sort of some things aligning. And so it's, although we can't show the levels of detail around some of the projects, I think the anti-circumvention, the IRA, among other things we're seeing move, are going to start to pay off. And so we look forward to be able to update the board and the public as soon as we can. With that being said, as Brad talked about, there's a lot still happening behind the scenes, whether that's watching Southwest Power Pool's generation interconnection study process advance. That's a big piece. We have the 2020, which impacts Platteview, which impacts our gas units. But some of those projects we saw early on, 2017, 2018, 2019 queues, those are going to start moving. And so we look forward to seeing those results and hopefully being able to understand what that means. With our project developers, truly our supplier partners, they've been gracious to continue to help us understand each time we get more information on the IRA or anti-circumvention. What does that do to pricing? What does that do to their potential to bring commercial operation dates and really reflect changes and make more realistic assumptions? So we have that detail. We continue to update it and be able to sort of make deployment plans with better information. We've talked a lot about IRA, but that is a big deal for looking at potential ownership. And then finally, it's continuing to bring our communities along with education and advocacy. And so we just don't want to lose sight of the good things that Tim O'Brien talked about a little bit ago, whether it's in Cass County, whether it's in Saunders County, Otoe County, and beyond, really continuing to advance the education, the policy to be able to bring these projects online. And so with that, that concludes the solar update, if there aren't any questions.
All right, team, I don't see any hands being raised. Courtney, thank you very much. And again, thank you for continuing to shepherd us through the solar process. It is a new muscle we're flexing at OPPD, and it takes a while to build muscles. So there you go. All right, the next, I think that was the last on our agenda. Or is there a transmission update?
Actually, there's one more quick update on Standing Bear and Turtle Creek, and that's a safety update.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, I just thought it was a good idea this time of year. If you guys remember at the board meeting when we asked that you guys select Zachary as our contractor for this effort for both those projects, we had some public opinions on that around safety. And so I think it's important to know that over this past year, Zachary's been their willingness to remain transparency around safety and health issues have been really good. Their senior site manager around safety has been available for questions and providing tours when we want to go to each site. Their commitment to quick action, their mitigation and incident reporting has been really good. And when we go visit the sites, we find that the sites are neat and organized, and that really helps when it comes to safety. And so the bottom line around safety is, so at OPPD, we keep track of DART cases, which are days away, restricted, and transferred. At either one of these sites, they haven't had a DART case this year. Now, they have had bumps and bruises and things first aid wise, but from a safety perspective, not having a DART case at either one of these facilities is really good. And so I thought it was important for the board to know that. So thank you.
And if I may, Chair Bogner, this is one where I asked Kevin McCormick to provide this update because it was important, and I didn't want that conversation that happened at the board meeting to be forgotten when members of the public asked us, hey, make sure that you hold your third-party contractors to the same standard as your own employees. And at the end of the day, it's the same life, right? The same health and the same safety of a human being. So this is a challenge that I gave to Kevin McCormick, who was already working on a project to enhance transparency and visibility of third-party contractor safety. And so the timing was perfect, and I wanted to make sure that I was responsive to the board, reporting back on the great results so far. there's a lot more work to be done, and we will continue to be paying attention to not only their work, but especially also with OPPD's work.
Thank you. We appreciate you bringing that back forward for us, because it was certainly a hot topic and conversation a few short months ago. So thank you, Kevin. All right, I think that is the end of our slide deck and the end of our agenda for today. Have I missed anything? Okay, very good, thank you. Okay, we at this point will adjourn, and I look forward to seeing you all on Thursday. We will begin our meeting on Thursday at 5 p.m. at the Omaha Douglas Civic Center. See you then. Bye.